Well, hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the 2024 Holistic Health and Wellness Forum for MS. My name, well, that's right, give them a round of applause. Why not? And actually, while you are applauding, let's give Mindy and her team a huge round of applause for always putting on such a great event, jam-packed with information to help all of us live our best lives with MS. Now, my name is Anquinette Jameson Sarfo, but most people call me Q. My face may be familiar to you, as I was fortunate to spend many years at Fox 2 Detroit as a morning news anchor, a job I loved and cherished, but one that my diagnosis of MS made difficult for me to continue. Since then, I became an activist working toward the legalization of cannabis, which is legal now, so yay. And I have found a culture where I guess you guys have found a culture as well, because thank you for keeping us busy at the table. But culture is a line of CBD and THC infused products available online and at select retail outlets. I also studied nutrition at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and often speak to community and support groups about the safe and appropriate uses of cannabis to help people nourish and heal their bodies and ease the symptoms of MS. I am proud to be here with you today to support you and Yoga Moves MS. We hope today you will learn and be inspired from a panel of medical and holistic experts that we have brought together to live your best healthy and holistic life. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Martin Belkin, neurologist at the Michigan Institute for Neurological Disorders in Farmington Hills, also known as MIND, one of the largest private MS centers in the country, and a Yoga Moves MS board member. Please welcome Dr. Martin Belkin.
Great, thank you. So thanks everyone for coming. My role tonight, I'm just introducing, kind of the program, this Holistic Health and Wellness Forum, which is really an amazing event. As a practitioner, in terms of treating patients with MS, we always really talk about being on treatment being disease-modifying therapies and the importance of doing so. But really equally important is focusing on wellness. And I don't know that that's always been emphasized enough. As providers, we always advocate and talk to patients that in most cases, we want them, they need to be on a disease-modifying therapy, so medication. However, again, equally important is talking about wellness. And it may not be talked about enough in clinic settings, but certainly that doesn't diminish the importance of it and how important it is in terms of patients with MS in particular. And wellness is many things. It's diet. We know that diet and food plays a role in inflammation, and there's various diets, various types of food programs that patients can be on. And so we have data certainly support that certain diets can help symptoms, fatigue in particular. So diet plays an incredible role. And then there's exercise and mindfulness, meditation, some of the breathing exercises that were just done. Again, incredibly important to help with relaxation, anxiety. But exercise is crucial. Yoga provides strength, it provides flexibility, it provides stretching, it provides the mindfulness component that maybe other exercise doesn't. As I mentioned, if you haven't attended a Yoga Moves MS class, I really encourage you to do so. And you're going to see some patient testimonials in a minute here. It's life-changing for people. And I really encourage people to do it. And again, it's there for everybody, and there's no limitation in terms of the ability to do a yoga or adaptive yoga, particularly what they do with Yoga Moves MS. So to that avail, I'm going to introduce, this is going to be a video that's going to play of the stories of patients who have, in their story in terms of their journey with Yoga Moves MS.
In adaptive yoga, everybody's coming up with their ideas about how things are going to fit their body. I think people believe that when you go to yoga, you're told how to do a pose and that there's a right way and a wrong way. But in the adaptive yoga room, especially, really all yoga should be like this, you get to be empowered to make the yoga work for you.
Talking to doctors, there's no easy fix to it. And for me, a lot of it is rest and recovery.
When you have a chronic condition such as multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's, there's a tendency to become isolated. I saw it with my mother, who had primary progressive MS. The friends started to dwindle, and even the family members, and you're left with basically caregivers.
I was diagnosed back in '77, and there was nothing at the time they could do. They told you to lay down and do nothing.
The community is what is the most important element.
It's like going to see my friends. That's what keeps me going.
I love the community. I love the way that Mindy communicates with her group and the interaction with people. I love what it's doing to help individuals with MS, to help them feel better. It's funny because when I was a child, I distinctly remember thinking that I wanted to be rich because I wanted to help people. Now that I've been involved in this organization, I realize that the richness comes from being with a community like this.
I like that I don't have to explain anything to anyone around because they already know.
It's nice to be with people that kind of understand what you're going through. It's just like a family, it really, like an extended family. It just makes you feel happy and just joyful. And I really like everybody there, and I can't imagine continuing without it.
I feel like I've had an opportunity to really do a lot of stretching and probably a lot of laughing and breathing. I can't stress enough the fact that we can all laugh at ourselves. Sometimes focus on the bad. We're not allowed to say that word in class.
The yoga has the ability to open people's hearts. Learning to be more grounded with a functional breath can actually help the body to find its home.
I always walk out of that class better than I walk in. I walk in stiff, and I walk out just, my legs feel so strong and stable and alive. They like tingle. They're because they've gotten a good stretch and the blood flow is there. It's just fantastic.
First and foremost is spasticity is a lot better. I don't have to fight my body so much to move around.
I feel a lot of energy when I leave this class, and that's what I really, really needed, is to have some energy, because I was just so fatigued all the time. Chronic fatigue.
And then there's the calming part of the whole class too. You might come in with a million things on your mind and stressed and worried about different issues, and you just leave it all at the door, relax on the mat, do the exercise, and you leave just at peace.
Everything, my whole body is at ease when I'm at MS Yoga.
In order to make an accessible, safe environment that can help the students flourish and be empowered, we provide multiple teachers in a room, and that is very different than a mainstream yoga class. Most of our classes have at least 2 teachers, usually 3 or 4. Our classes are donation only, which was a decision I made because I want yoga to be accessible to every and anybody. There is no way these classes could happen without the generous support of our donors and sponsors.
Yoga Moves MS has given me the ability to look at things from a holistic perspective. Yoga's always been something that has helped me, from breathing that seems very simple, but often is life-saving.
This is the best thing that ever happened to me, and for anybody with MS, they need to give it a try.
I'm so proud to be part of Yoga Moves MS.
Okay, so I hope that the video gave a little flavor for what the class is and what Yoga Moves MS can do for patients. So again, I really encourage people to, if you haven't tried it, reach out in person, potentially virtually, to join a Yoga Moves MS class. So next, it's my pleasure. I want to you've already, I think everyone probably has known or met Mindy, but certainly a more formal introduction. So Mindy Eisenberg founded Yoga Moves MS 19 years ago. She's become a leader of the MS community, and she's really a true advocate for MS patients. She's done tremendous things to really help the MS community and MS patients as a whole, and provides this education, which is really invaluable. So I'm certainly happy that I came before Mindy because her energy is truly unmatched. And so I just want to introduce Mindy Eisenberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Velkin. You guys are amazing. We've had an interesting start with some sound things going on. So take a moment, because part of mindfulness, sometimes we focus on breath and sometimes we focus on sensation. We do sensation a lot in class, but some people, believe it or not, don't want to focus on their breath. And so they focus on sound. We don't judge the sound. We just go, sound. It's sound. It doesn't have a good or a bad. So welcome to all of you. And I'm so excited to be here. I want to go through a few housekeeping things with you. You already know who we are. We're Yoga Moves MS. We are a nonprofit that provides adaptive yoga for people with neuromuscular conditions, primarily MS. Our whole mission is that yoga should be accessible to all. And as the interest in science behind holistic health has grown, we thought it was a natural step to add to our mission to serve the community with education about wellness and integrative care. We're thrilled that you're here. We're thrilled by the response to these events. Today is our 5th year of providing a forum of this kind, all of which have had an incredible audience, which tells us that the information and the gathering, I must say, the gathering, the being in community, that's what's highly valued. So we pulled together this amazing lineup of speakers who are so knowledgeable about their respective topics. They will provide you with important research and concepts. They're hot off the press, state of the art. A few housekeeping reminders. Our schedule is super tight, especially with our snafus in the beginning here. So we're going to have a little movement built into the middle of the program, but please feel free, go to the restroom if you need to, move around a little bit, feel free to stand. There'll be about 5 minutes after each speaker's presentation. That's where the Q&A and the questions come in. So those of you on virtual, you're going to put your questions in the chat. Those of you who are present right here in this room, there's going to be some microphones going around and we will run to get your question answered. We'll take as many as we can in that time. Many ask us about what is the virtual exhibit hall. The virtual hall contains information on today's speakers, our generous sponsors, exhibitors, and partners who made this program possible. We could not do it without them. After today, the presentations, the recordings from them will be in the virtual exhibit hall. So you'll go to the website and look under events at yogamovesms.org, and there you will find the recordings. We need and value your feedback, and we want to constantly improve these events. So we're bribing you. You'll get a gift that you can download after you complete the surveys. Thank you to all of the attendees here. This is why we do this, because of you. You're here, and we value so much being connected in this room together and virtually together. We feel you, virtual attendees. I want to namaste, say thank you to our planning committee who helps us think about the big picture and the smallest of details to offer you the very best. There are so many people to express gratitude to, and each and every one of you here is vital to our community. People in our committee is Gina Beach, Laureen Branch, Marnie Sharon, Karen Cohen, Lindsay Dems, Kathy McRae, Leah Narens, Lori Olson, Beth Stone, and Lori Svensson. Yes, thank you. I have to add in that these two over here, they've been very, very, very busy planning this event. I get these texts in the morning. What do you want me to work on from Lori? She's always ahead of me. Special thanks to Elaine Gross, who provides the photography. She's been going around. You probably recognize her because she's at every single one of our events. And no, we do not take you for granted. Special thank you to Ann Quinnett, Q. Jameson Sarfo. You've met her. She shares her incredible talent. She comes up here like it's nothing and keeps us moving along. Namaste to our amazing yoga moves instructors. Many of them are here today. Please stand up if you're here. I'm going to read off some names. They are why we do what we do. They are the thread. They keep us together. They do the important work working with our students. Anna Cairns, Jill Dunphy, Deborah Henderson, Betty Ann Hodges, Kathy McRae, Marcia Williams. Namaste to our generous sponsors and exhibitors. Our top sponsor, TG Therapeutics. Second level, Biogen, then Amgen, Genentech, and Novartis. Thank you so much to our exhibitors. Michigan Institute for Neurological Disorders, Alexion, Bristol Myers Squibb. You can go ahead and you can clap, it's good. EMD Sereno, Beatrice. We clap for everybody. Our exhibitors, Better Life Home Care and Motown Massage. You guys rock. You guys rock. I see the people who've gotten a massage. They're like, oh yeah, they're like on another planet. Memorial Healthcare Institute for Neuroscience. Yay. MS Society is here. Yes. Physical Therapy and More at Michigan Ear Institute. You're going to hear from Jennifer. She's got an amazing presentation coming up. Q Culture. Train the brain and walk the line. So take a moment, take your hands together and think about what you're grateful for as we transition. I'm going to call back Dr. Belkin back up here to introduce. Make an introduction.
All right, thanks, Mindy. So, we'll get the program started. So I have the pleasure and honor of introducing the first speaker. This is Dr. Jonathan Doty. John did his neurology residency training through Corewell Health, or Beaumont at the time, and is currently doing an MS fellowship at our clinic at Michigan Institute for Neurological Disorders with myself and our whole team. And so John is, incredibly bright, dedicated to the field of MS and helping MS patients. He will be working full-time in the Mind MS Center starting in July in both our Farmington Hills as well as Dearborn Heights location. So seeing just MS and related disorders. So without any other ado, Dr. Jonathan Doty.
Thank you, Dr. Balkan, and hello, everyone. So I have been given the honor of giving you a brief overview of some of the latest research in MS. So when we talk about clinical trials, you may come across these terms, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and wonder, what do these terms mean? So phase 1 is the very initial part of studies that really just looks at, is this therapy safe? Before we ever look at, is it effective for MS? And that we obviously want to make sure it's safe. After that step, it goes on to phase 2. These are larger trials where we really look at, does that therapy actually work like in the condition that we're looking at, in this case, MS. After that, it goes on to phase 3, which is even bigger, really looking at the safety, still the efficacy for that. And that's really the step that needs to occur for the therapy to get approved and really come to market. And then after it comes to market, there's still longer studies, and that's what phase 4 is, really looking at the long-term data, side effects, those sorts of things. So moving on, one of the therapies that's the furthest along in trials are these BTK inhibitors. And basically what these are oral medications. Some are once a day or twice a day. And really with these, we have a lot of data from them being used in the oncology world for leukemias and lymphomas. So we have a lot of information on the safety piece of this, obviously at different doses than what's being looked at for MS. But the exciting part of these BTKs or these therapies is that the way it works is more directly targeting the inflammation in MS, more than current therapies that we have. So I drew in this little picture just to kind of help visualize what we're talking about with this. So on the left side is essentially the blood or the periphery of our body. And essentially all our MS therapies that we currently have, this is where they work. Now, the exciting part about BTKs is that on the left side, you can see that's the central nervous system, so the brain or the spinal cord. And what these BTK inhibitors are presumed to do is be able to cross into the central nervous system and target these immune cells that cause the inflammation with MS. So in a way that we don't currently have or aren't able to achieve with our current therapies. So as I mentioned, these are a little bit more selective than what is currently available. They target the immune system in a certain way that maybe potentially not as suppressive as some of our therapies, but still achieving, or the hope is that still achieving quite a significant effect, both in terms of reducing inflammation, preventing relapses, but also potentially reducing disability and progression. So it's currently being looked at in both relapsing MS, but also progressive MS, which is really the excitement if these do turn out to be successful. And these are some of them that are furthest along. We're anticipating to have the data or really know more by the end of this year. So very exciting times to potentially have a whole new type of therapy available. Another type of therapy is the CD40 antibody. And this is an infusion type of therapy. The way this works is essentially it blocks the talking between these immune cells. So rather than suppressing the immune system directly or depleting out certain immune cells, it just blocks that talking. So because of that effect, the theory or potential is that it's not suppressing the immune system, or again, at least not as much as certain other therapies, but still having an effect. And this is also being looked at in both relapsing and progressive forms of MS, starting up in phase 3 trials. So again, getting closer to potential new therapies that may be on the horizon. Then I just threw in just a little brief talk on stem cell transplant. So we always hear about stem cells as a potential therapy for MS. Now, stem cell transplant, it's very intensive, and this is the best way to think about it is like a hard reboot or reset of the immune system, where trying to wipe out the immune system, deplete out all those memory of the immune system or attacking itself. That way, when it rebuilds itself, that memory is no longer there. And the largest, or one study that's really looking at this more, is a trial over a total of 6 years, really looking at stem cell transplant compared to the best available therapies we currently have on the market. So this is still in the works. I think 2029 is when this is anticipated to end and have the data from that. But again, another piece of research that's really being looked at this. And then finally, the ultimate goal is remyelination therapies. And obviously that's the ultimate goal of can we repair the damage that's been done from MS? Now, a lot of different therapies are being looked at for this. One that's a little bit closer, phase 2, so not quite at that phase 3, closest to coming to market, but potentially is an antihistamine. Now, there's data that we have that an older antihistamine may be helpful to repair myelin, but had a lot of negative side effects with that. So a different antihistamine is currently being studied that can have that similar effect to repair myelin, just without all those negative side effects, in addition to the therapies that we currently have preventing relapses. I think that is all I have for you. Yeah. So obviously still very exciting time with research and this whole entire field, and just having new things being studied, both in terms of preventing new relapses, really achieving what we have as far as preventing anything new from happening, but also looking at, can we repair things? So yeah, stay tuned.
The audience, up, coming. Get ready. All right, your question, what's your name? Yep.
My name is Patty, and thank you for this. Thank you, Mindy, for this. And
Thank you for being here.
I have a question about CRISPR technology and MS specifically.
What's your question?
Is there anything in the works using that technology?
That I am not specifically sure. I don't believe so, or nothing that I've come across or read.
That's an answer.
Okay. All right, next question.
Hi, I'm Kira. My questions are about the BTKI and the anti-CD40. Meaning less suppressive, that means it wouldn't be taking the B cells out of your immune system anymore, correct?
Right, so it doesn't deplete those cells out, just essentially turns them off in a sense to where they can't be activated and drive that inflammation.
So would they have any productivity in your body anymore anyways, or would they just be sitting there inactive?
So with BTKs, I believe, there's some data that when they are activated or drive that inflammation, the signal or the signature of those is a little bit different than the normal B cells in our system. So a little bit more selective at targeting those bad or negative B cells rather than depleting all of them out. So that's where some of the potential interest is can they still be working in the immune system in a sense to where not depleting those out with all the untoward side effects of that, but still have its effect.
And with that, I am currently on Ocrevus, which means I don't have my B cells, which I've learned the hard way that my body doesn't know how to produce a temperature anymore when I get a cold or something like that. So would that mean that these new therapies may still be able to have your body mark for other issues like a cold or this, that, and the other that need addressing?
Potentially. I mean, that's
Phase three, I got it.
Yeah. So I have to see as we get more data, as we get further along in these trials. But yeah, that's definitely one of the hopes or the interest with that those whole classes.
And probably the same with like now, if you have some sort of issue happening with your body, your symptoms don't present normally anymore, right? So would that maybe also be something that it's approached where, if you have a UTI, maybe your pee will burn again. TMI, so sorry.
Don't have a specific answer for that,
yeah.
But yeah.
Got one more question over here.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question from the internet world. It says, it's been mentioned that metformin is being used to repair myelin. Is that true? Is there research on this?
So I believe that is being studied. I believe there was one trial looking at that and clemistine, I believe, or a combination of that. But I do know that is being studied. There's another, I believe, just a European study looking at statins, actually. So cholesterol lowering medicines is another thing that is being looked at too.
Thank you. Thank you. There's one more question.
Hi there, doctor. I had a question about the remyelination therapy. If they do come out with a pill for that, is it going to restore any damaged myelin that may be there from before?
So that's the hope, is that it can restore and repair that damage that is there.
And you said that they're working on a new one because the one that they're doing now, the oral pill, you said that had like a lot of side effects.
Yeah, so they're looking at a different type of antihistamine that potentially could still have that effect, but none of the negative side effects from it.
So if there's more questions beyond what is able to ask to the speakers, please just find a piece of paper or we'll hand some paper out and write your question on it and the speaker, and we'll try to get them to answer it prior to you leaving tonight, or it's something we'll post on the website. We appreciate all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's give Dr. Doty one more round of applause, please. Thank you for all of that information. Next, we are pleased to present Benifer Bugley. Benifer earned her degree in physical therapy in 1990 from Bombay University in India. She is a licensed physical therapist in the state of Michigan. She has worked in acute care, inpatient rehab, and outpatient multidisciplinary clinics at St. John Providence Ascension Health System in Southfield and Novi for 25 years. Currently, she is working in collaboration with otolaryngologist. She's gonna correct me on that one later, but yeah. Oh, that was perfect. Oh, she's being very kind. Skull-based surgeons at Michigan Ear Institute. As Clinical Director of Physical Therapy and Beyond, a clinic specializing in vestibular and balance rehabilitation, dizziness and falls prevention, craniosacral therapy, and also integrating other highly skilled customized services. She emphasizes a holistic approach, focusing on quality outcomes to help you achieve your goals in decreasing pain and improving functional abilities. Benifer has been a craniosacral therapy practitioner since 1996 and currently holds a diplomate advanced level certification in craniosacral therapy from the Uplinger Institute. She is a clinical instructor and mentors students enrolled in PT and PTA programs, conducts lectures and presentations for the community and other professionals in craniosacral therapy, falls prevention, and vestibular rehabilitation. Currently, she is a certified instructor with the Uplinger Institute and teaches CST1 and CST for pediatrics internationally. Benifer will be speaking with us today on the topic of craniosacral therapy and vestibular therapy. Please welcome Benifer Bugley.
This is easier. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me in the back? No, not yet. Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm here today to very briefly talk about vestibular rehab, craniosacral therapy, and how these might benefit someone with neuromuscular conditions such as MS. When you think physical therapy, what are we thinking about? Most people think of exercise, strengthening, stretching. Maybe if you have pain, you're thinking about pain relieving modalities. But really, or in actuality, as my friend says, when you think physical therapy, you should think way more than that. Because physical therapy, each person is unique and each treatment should be unique, right? It depends not just on the diagnosis that you come in with, but it depends on the challenges that you present with because of that diagnosis. So am I echoing in the back? You good? Okay. So ideally, the treatments are determined based on a thorough evaluation of what your challenges might be. And then we decide on the treatment in order to address the root cause, not just the symptoms. One of the main things that you hear about with MS is challenges and disruption of the myelin sheath. Myelin is like an insulation that covers all of your nerves, and it helps them kind of address and send messages to different end organs, your muscles, at extremely, extremely high speeds and with specific efficiency, very detailed and great precision. Demyelination, when you come through demyelination, interferes with with those messages, right? It interferes with how these messages are sent, and they'll have an effect on not just the speed and accuracy of the messages, but how your muscles respond to those messages. So you could have an effect, it then has an effect on how you move or how you respond to your stimulus. Sorry. If you look at this slide that's behind me, you could have things that are an issue with not just motor, gross motor, like big movements where walking is an issue or sports is an issue. It can have challenges, lead to challenges with fine motor stuff where you have trouble sewing or turning a page. You could have trouble with your strength, or your strength could be fine. It could affect your coordination. It affects how you could, it affects how you react in that moment in time. So all of those lead to how all of those lead to a lot of challenges with balance, coordination of movement, and how you lead your day-to-day lives. whether it be at home or at work. Being that we're affiliated with Michigan Ear Institute, we see a lot of people that come in with dizziness and imbalance. Now, balance could be due to, imbalance is just a symptom, right? It could be due to a lot of different reasons. So we're always assessing, what is this from? Is it an orthopedic issue? Is it more neurological, vestibular? And more often than not, if you have somebody that comes in with imbalance, they're describing it as dizziness at times. And dizziness is a very common term that people frequently use to describe a variety of different problems. So when someone comes to us with a balance issue, one of the evaluations that we look at is called the sensory organization test. This little colorful box and contraption that you see behind me, it's called the computerized dynamic posturography. This machine, what it does is you have the person stand in here, facing in, and it's a three-sided box. The force plate, the place where you're standing on is a force plate that moves, the box moves, and the force plate is connected to this little computer back here. So we test you on 6 different conditions and give you 3 tries for each condition. And depending on how you do, it gives us an idea of which of the main balance systems are you relying on more or less, or which one's not really supporting you. So any person that comes to us with functional mobility that's challenged or imbalanced, it's really important to address the 3 main balance systems: your vision, your eyes, your inner ears, and the proprioceptive cues that you're receiving, your proprioceptive system, the system that helps you get messages from your legs, from your joints, muscles, that tells you where your body is without having to look at it. Which one is really struggling and which one are you relying on way more than you need to? Once we know that, then we can formulate a tailored exercise program or balance treatment for just that individual. When we're challenging your balance to figure out how far can you go before you lose your balance, safety is a big concern. Most of the people who've had physical therapy are familiar with a gait belt, right? When used correctly, gait belts are wonderful, but we've added an extra layer of safety. So if you look at these overhead rails in our clinic, we have 5-point harnesses that hook up to those rails. They don't lift you up, but they stop you from going down. So it really gives us and our clients a lot more confidence, I would say, in order to push them to do things and work with balance issues that normally wouldn't be safe to do. Oh, there you go. We were playing around a few years ago when we were setting up the clinic to see what we can do with these harnesses. They are actually connected into the structure of the building. So each little segment of that rail can take up to 500 pounds. So we never worry about somebody falling down. But I don't think it's very comfortable to sit and have your tea in those harnesses. That's just for a momentary safety measure. I wanted to take a marketing picture, like a Superman pose, but the harnesses are designed to keep you upright and stop you from falling down. So we couldn't do that. He had to actually hold on to these bars and push himself and hold himself there in that horizontal position in order for us to be able to take this picture. They will, as soon as you go down, it thinks you're falling and it pulls you straight back up. So let's see, where am I at? We know a few basic things about MS, right? And I dare say this in presence of so many neurologists in the room. So we know that it affects our central nervous system. We know that it's a chronic inflammatory disease. We know that there's demyelination, there's neurodegeneration, and that there's an abnormal immune system response that goes on. However, to my knowledge, the question of what came first? What came first? Which one is the root cause that sets off some of the other challenges is still undetermined. So that brings me to talking about craniosacral therapy. Craniosacral therapy has its roots in osteopathy. And by definition, it's a very gentle hands-on technique that helps you detect and correct imbalances within your central nervous system. If you think of what craniosacral system is, it's a system that, it's a physiological system like your cardiovascular system or your GI system. And it's supposed to help you in the production, circulation, and absorption of the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid really helps bring about nutrition and remove waste matter, right? It's the fluid that helps nourish and maintain the health of our central nervous system. If you look at this picture, there's where your brain would be and your spinal cord, and there's 3 layers of membranes that surround your brain and your spinal cord. And the fluid flows between the inner 2 layers most of the time, or the bulk of the volume of that fluid. And through very small micro openings, it kind of seeps out into the surrounding brain, spinal cord, and nourishes the nervous tissue. So you say, okay, this is all the way in there. What are you going to do with your hands? How do you have an effect on the central nervous system that far, that deep in our bodies? Through fascia, right? If you think, have you heard the song, the ankle bone is connected to the knee bone, is connected to the hip bone? It's true. It's true. So that's, everything is connected to everything else in our body. If you think of fascia, it's a key player in forming that connection. It helps in health. It's stretchy, it's flexible. If I gain 100 pounds tomorrow, I'm not going to burst. My skin stretches with me, right? But when it's restricted, when you have fascial restriction patterns for any reason, it can affect how you move. It decreases mobility externally and internally. And it can cause a lot of pain. And it can cause random pain, the kind that you could see in fibromyalgia, for example. So I want to share this. There we go. That's a picture from Dr. Gambertou's work. And he's a French osteopathic plastic surgeon. And he developed the way of taking pictures during surgery using an endoscope. And so he has some amazing videos and a book and DVDs and whatever that can share all these images with you. If you look at fascia in real life, it's so much different than what we see when we go to dissection classes and work on, cadavers. So the tissue just is different. It's pliable. Okay, so how does this work and benefit people who have multiple sclerosis, right? So using this gentle technique, using craniosacral therapy, we can actually work on decreasing tissue tension. We work with the restrictions that we learn how to palpate with our hands. And when you release restrictions within the body, now you're allowing the body fluids, including the deeper ones, including your CSF, to flow better, to reach places that it might not have been able to reach before. And remember, we said CSF actually helps bring nutrition, remove waste matter, so it helps improve the health of your central nervous system. When your central nervous system functions better, everything about you functions better. So it's not diagnosis specific, right? It's just about supporting the body and functioning at its optimum level. We learn, it's like learning piano. You can't really learn it by hearing somebody talk about it or reading a book. You have to actually get down and practice for hours and hours in order to feel and learn how to listen with your hands. So once you do that, you can support the body in releasing the tension patterns in whichever way the body needs. Once the body doesn't have to work so hard to move around those tension patterns, now you've freed up the energy that it was using in kind of working around these restrictions to use that energy for whatever else is needed. So it's available for you, okay? And that's that. Okay, before I take any questions, I just want to say a few thank yous. To Yoga Moves MS, to Mindy, wherever she is, and to Lori Svensson for inviting me here to talk tonight. I want to say, I just want to say a big heartfelt thank you and always with gratitude to Upledger Institute and to all past and present out there who have helped me in my learning and my journey through craniosacral therapy. It's changed how I practice. Also, last but not the least, I want to say thank you to Michigan Ear Institute, because without their support, we couldn't have developed this vestibular rehab and balance center, this facility that we have in Farmington Hills, just about a mile up the street. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Over here.
Hello, okay, there we go. Who has a question?
My question is, have you heard of PONS therapy by Helios Medical?
Pons?
PONS, P-O-N-S?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Sorry. Are they, do you care to elaborate? He needs the mic back.
Oh.
It's a therapy where it's a device that you put on your tongue, and it's meant to train your brain to do physical therapy in a different ways, trying to create new pathways.
No,
You
no,
haven't heard
I
of that
have
one?
not heard. I've read something similar, but I don't believe it was called Pons.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Do either of these modalities have anything to do with memory function?
Maybe craniosacral therapy. I mean, it just helps improve your overall health. So, and it helps balance out your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. When you're in a high sympathetic mode where you can't, you're on fight or flight, memory is not ideal. It's not functioning at its best. And so if you can help bring up the parasympathetics on board, that may help. It's a possibility, yes.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question online.
Is there a question, or I'm sorry, how do you find a good craniosacral therapist? And once you have one, how many sessions do you think it takes?
How do you find a good craniosacral therapist? Where there are so many. If you go online to, I want to say, I trained under Upledger Institute, so I'm going to tell you about them. I know there are other modalities out there that use similar cranial osteopathy approaches, and they've evolved in different ways. But you could go to upledger.com, or you could go to IAHP, International Association of Healthcare Practitioners and say, find a practitioner, put in your zip code or put in just the first 3 to 4 digits of your zip code to widen the net. And all the people who trained under Upledger, even like 1 weekend workshop or 20 workshops, they'll all pop up. And they have their credentials on one side. So you'll know if you're working with a massage therapist, a physician, a nurse, a physical therapist. And as far as how many sessions, it depends on the person. If you're coming in for something specific, most places will say, start with once a week or once in 2 weeks. And then as things settle and get more stable, you can then extend the, treatments to like once a month or as needed.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
time for one more question. Does anybody have a question back here?
Hello.
Does craniosacral help with?
Does craniosacral help with neuropathy? Possibly, right?
Well, that sounds hopeful.
Because
Thank you.
just remember, craniosacral is not diagnosis specific. We're just helping release restrictions, helping your body function at its optimum. And so whatever changes are going to happen in the body will be supported at that point. So, okay. All right. Is that
Thank
good?
you. Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckley. Up next, we have Tim Mann. Tim is a proud husband and father from Chelsea, Michigan. He is married to his wonderful wife, Samantha, and together they have 2 daughters, Adeline and Reagan. Tim works as a peak performance coach and has trained thousands of individuals in breath work, cold water immersion, heat exposure, and mindset. He has worked with top-tier athletic programs such as the University of Houston football, University of Michigan soccer, and University of Detroit Mercy basketball. Tim is a published research scientist, recently co-authoring a paper with Wayne State University Psychiatry and Behavioral Neuroscience Department. He also works as a licensed professional counselor, owning and operating a private counseling practice. Tim has a master's degree in counseling from the University of Detroit Mercy, where he served as a graduate assistant for the basketball program, and a bachelor's degree in outdoor recreation and leadership management from Northern Michigan University. Tim loves working in the field of mental health as well as athletics. He loves to spend time outdoors swimming, hiking, kayaking, cross-country skiing, and spending time with family. Man, he is busy. Tim's topic is optimizing your health with the Wim Hof method. Welcome, Tim. And you already had the mic.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Yoga Moves MS, for having me here today. I truly feel honored to be here. And what I teach outside, my basic job is a school counselor. I work in the schools Monday through Friday in a high school in Chelsea. Stand back. So I work as a school counselor Monday through Friday, but on the side, I offer Wim Hof method workshops. And these workshops are rare. You can think of them as being underground. And you can think of them being underground. What I teach is something that's actually underground and inside of you. This thing that I teach is something that you can unlock that's inside of you to help optimize your health and performance. What I love so much about what I teach is that it's low cost and it's accessible. I teach you how to breathe properly and how to use cold water immersion to really optimize your mental and physical health. So let's get into that. This is the Wim Hof method. I was already introduced. So what is the Wim Hof method? It's a combination of having a growth mindset, doing breath work, and cold water immersion. And when you combine those 3 pillars, it helps construct a happy and healthy life. And lucky for me, when I found out about the Wim Hof method, it was at the perfect time. And a huge part of it is having a growth mindset. And I've been learning that growth mindset through my father my whole life. My dad, he's sitting over here today. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 30 some years ago. And this guy struggles to do basic life functioning that I take for granted every day. Things like putting my socks on or taking a short walk. And this guy, throughout all those struggles, has the most resilient and positive mindset. And so when I heard on the Wim Hof method about having a growth mindset, I just thought of my dad and how much of an impact he's had on me throughout my life. It just really resonated with me. And so props to Pops. He's why I'm here today. So thank you, Dad. So how did I get here? Obviously my dad and my mom, but further than that, I was hit by a drunk driver while I was parked on the side of the highway back in 2017. I fractured 11 bones, suffered a fractured ankle, tore my medial meniscus, lacerated my liver, dislocated my jaw, smacked my head really good, and fractured my skull in multiple places. Got rushed to the ICU. They had to perform emergency brain surgery because I had all this intracranial hypertension. My brain started to swell up like a balloon. So they drilled a hole into my brain to save my life. Thank God. In a coma for 8 days, came out of that coma, was diagnosed with an emergent mood disorder, which is common after traumatic brain injury of that severity, and PTSD, and addicted to painkillers. I got out of that hospital setting and was going through rehabilitation, and I came across the Wim Hof method. And when I heard about the Wim Hof method, like I said, it just really resonated with me. Again, it's a growth mindset, a certain breathwork technique, and cold water immersion. Now, I couldn't take a cold shower at this time because I had a neck brace on and an arm sling and a boot, but I could breathe. And so I started doing rounds upon rounds upon rounds of this breathwork every day. And the best way I can explain it is it rewired my nervous system. We're going to talk about the breathwork and exactly what it does, but it helped give me a sense of control in my life. It helped me gain control of my mood. My mood was up and down all day, every day. It gave me control of that mood, and it gave me a sense to will to live again and really make something out of my life. So it really saved my life. So what does it do? It teaches individuals how to use low cost and accessible resources to optimize their health and performance. What does practicing the Wim Hof method look like? It's really simple. It's having a dedicated mindset, practicing every day and doing a simple breathwork practice and doing a cold shower, or if you can, an ice bath. So who is Wim Hof method for? Almost everybody. There are some contraindications with the method, but I've ran tons and tons of workshops. I've had people from the ages of 16 to 87. And it's amazing running these workshops because you get to build community. You see people come together, connect with each other, and do something that's really hard. And they do it together. So you really strengthen bonds and relationships at these workshops. That's a picture up in the UP where we all went in together in the middle of the lake. Fantastic. Had to share it. All right, so there was an endotoxin study done. If you don't know who Wim Hof is, he's kind of a wild man. He's got 26 Guinness World Records. He has submerged himself in ice from his toes up to his neck and raised his core body temperature. And so that really gained him scientific attention. And once he did that, we started studying him. And they found amazing things going on in his body when he would do this breathing practice and when he would do cold water immersion. And then so he came up with this method and started teaching other people. And they soon found it wasn't Wim who was special. It was this method that was special. And that these things happen in everybody's body when they follow this protocol. This endotoxin study. Wim was making claims that he didn't get sick. So what did they do? Radboud University, they injected him with an endotoxin, E. coli, dead shell of bacteria, makes 100 out of 100 people sick. Cold sweats, fevers, diarrhea, sick, E. coli. He gets injected with this E. coli, practices the breathing exercise, no symptoms. They say, oh, you must have special genetics. He says, let me train 12 guys. They applied for a grant. He got it. They took 12 guys up into the mountains of Poland, taught them breath work, cold water immersion, and a growth mindset in just 4 days. Those 12 guys returned to Radboud University, all got injected with E. coli, no symptoms. All 18 guys in the control group got sick. And again, this is published research, right? I'm not just making this up. You can look this up online. It seems hard to believe, but let me tell you, if you practice the breath work, you will feel in your body what I'm talking about. And that's understanding. I can talk to my face is blue. You won't get it. But if you try the breath work, you will understand because you'll start to feel things special. So benefits of the breathing. When you do this breath work, you get these cell messaging proteins called interleukin-10. You get a huge boost of these. These are anti-inflammatory cell messaging proteins. They help kill inflammation in the body. Pretty cool. You also get a huge boost of adrenaline. You get more adrenaline when you practice this breath work than somebody who's actually bungee jumping. So let me tell you really briefly, it's not sitting quietly in a room alone and focusing on your breathing, although that's fantastic as well. It's called cyclical hyperventilation. It's a fancy term for deep breathing. You do 30 deep breaths in a row, and then you hold your breath. And when you do that, your body releases adrenaline and interleukin-10 and decreases inflammation. Another cool thing is, we can go weeks without food, we can go days without water, but we can only go minutes without breathing. And yet a lot of us don't pay attention to our breath. A lot of us will breathe from our chest. We're not in tune with our diaphragm and know how to breathe into our belly. And we learn how to belly breathe and get that oxygen down deep into our system. You can alleviate a lot of unnecessary stress and anxiety in your life. So that's another bonus about coming to a workshop is I'll teach you how to breathe properly. Safety. You never want to do this if you're pregnant, if you're epileptic, or if you have a serious underlying heart condition. You never want to do it in or near the water. Some people, if they push themselves too far, you can pass out, right? If you're doing deep breathing over and over again, you start to get lightheaded. So again, don't do it in or near the water or operating heavy machinery. Cold exposure, another pillar of the method. It's a hormetic stressor. So we know that acute stressors, short-term stressors are very healthy for the brain and body. Long-term stress, chronic stress, not good, but short-term stressors like exercise, yoga, cold water immersion, saunas, really good for you. Even the breath work that we teach in the workshops, it's an acute stressor because it's breath work. You have to work through that portion. It does take effort. So something really cool, as a mental health professional, I love this slide. If you spend just 1 minute in cold water, 59 degrees Fahrenheit or below, so Lake Superior any time of year, 59 degrees Fahrenheit or below, you get over a 500% increase in noradrenaline. A lot of antidepressants, not all of them, but a lot of antidepressants on the market will target noradrenaline receptors in your brain. So it's a natural mood enhancer. You also get a huge increase in dopamine. Dopamine goes up 250%, just 1 minute in cold water. It's amazing. Mood and energy affected for 6 to 8 hours after you do your intervention. Okay, you also get cold shock proteins when you submerge yourself in cold water. Those are anti-inflammatory, so you can decrease inflammation as well. You also get a great mindful practice. You're very present when you're taking your cold shower. You're not thinking about picking up your child from daycare or paying your mortgage. You are very much so in the moment. You also get to train your entire cardiovascular network. And so you have 80,000 some miles of veins, arteries, and capillaries that run through your body. That cardiovascular network, there's little muscles that go through it. And when you do consistent cold exposure every day, those little muscles get stronger. And so your heart has to beat less. So I've had countless people who wear Apple Watches contact me after a workshop saying, hey, I've been practicing for a month and my resting heart rate has gone down 20 beats per minute. So it's amazing. You strengthen your cardiovascular system significantly. And one of the biggest killers of people worldwide is cardiovascular related diseases. So that's a nice hidden benefit. And again, it's just cold water. We all got access to cold water. It's low cost and it's accessible. Okay, there have been some studies done. We need more evidence, right? Always need more research. There's been a lot of small studies done. One of those being the effect that Wim Hof method has on autoimmune disorders. And what they found in 2019 was they studied 24 people who suffer from axial spondyloarthritis. And they found in the intervention group that they had lower levels of inflammation compared to the other. So more research is needed, yes. Some preliminary studies and anecdotal evidence suggest possible benefits. So go to wimhofmethod.com, look at the testimonials section, and just listen to some of these people's stories. There's countless people who have suffered from multiple sclerosis who have used this method. It's to help manage their symptoms. And there's some really great stories on there. And I think it can help a lot of people if you take the time to check it out. All right, immune system modulation. We know that the breath work helps strengthen the immune system. So since MS is an immune-mediated disease characterized by inflammation and damage to the nervous system, some proponents believe that the method's effects on the immune system may have potential benefits for MS patients. Helps with stress reduction. There's no doubt about that. You get to learn how to master the stress response. When you put yourself in cold water, it's a dangerous situation. It's stressful. You learn how to breathe through that. And that gives you confidence, that gives you mental resilience, and that actually transfers over to other domains of your life. So you'll be able to handle that tough conversation with your spouse more effectively, or handle that conversation with your boss more effectively. Thermoregulation. Cold exposure, a key component of the Wim Hof method, is believed to improve thermoregulation and activate the body's natural mechanisms for maintaining homeostasis. Some individuals with MS may experience heat sensitivity, and the ability to regulate body temperature through practices like cold exposure could potentially be beneficial. Again, there's limited clinical studies. I'm not recommending that anybody in this room go out and try the Wim Hof method. That's not what I'm recommending. I'm recommending you do your own research and you have a conversation with your primary care physician to see if this method's right for you. I want to show you, there's a lot of great testimonials on the WimHofMethod.com website with people with a wide variety of autoimmune disorders. If you go to WimHofMethod.com, click on testimonials, you can find a lot more stories of people who have found benefit from this method, specifically with autoimmune disorders and a plethora of other disorders as well.
Thank you. We've got a question from the internet.
Yeah.
Hi, our virtual attendee is asking, will a cold shower suffice or do you need to submerge? And are there studies and protocols developed that look at using the Wim Hof method specifically for MS? Or are there any being conducted? And they also asked if you could put the microphone closer to your mouth.
I absolutely can put the microphone closer to my mouth. A cold shower works wonders. It's not as good as fully submerging into an ice plunge, but it's still very good for you. So if you can get in a cold shower, do it. There's no current research or past research done specifically with MS. I'm hopeful for the future.
Any other questions? Oh, we've got one in the back here. Hold on.
Hi. So I deal with seizures. So has anyone actually did this that has seizures?
That's a great question. I've had individuals with epilepsy in my workshops, but I do require that they get a doctor's note from their neurologist. So short answer is yes, but you need a doctor's note to participate in a workshop.
Anybody else back here? I know we've got another online or virtual question, right? No? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, we've got in person.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the difference between the yoga breath is. I'd like to know what the difference between the yoga breath is and the breath that you do with your the Wim or whatever. The Wim Hof.
Great question. So yoga meditation to me, I'm not a yoga instructor, but yoga meditation to me seems mostly about mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Wim Hof method breathing is taking 30 deep breaths in a row, really big deep breaths, filling up your belly, then your chest, just lightly letting it go, and then right into the next one. So you're really doing that over and over again for 30 times. And then you go into a breath hold. And after you hold your breath, you take a big inhale in, hold it for 15 seconds, let it go. That's one round. And then you keep going. You do 3 to 4 rounds, and each round you go deeper and deeper and start activating more and more of the body's potential.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
All right, real quick, I did co-author a research paper with Wayne State recently. It shows there's implications for the Wim Hof method and anxiety. We're working on a new study right now, a 5-year study. Going to generalize these findings to the public once we run it. So that's really exciting. Trying to think what else I got here for you. Won't take time to go over that, although it's a great slide. If you want to check out my website, you go to trainthebrainllc.com or wimhofmethod.com. I do workshops all over the state. And this is my side gig. I'm not concerned about making a bunch of money doing this. If you are struggling financially and you can't afford the $150 workshop, you reach out to me, send me an email. We'll figure something out. All right. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you.
While they're getting situated, I'll let you know what's coming up next. Mindy Eisenberg, MHSA, comma, CIAYT. You can explain what all these initials mean later. Is the founder and director of Yoga Moves MS, a nonprofit 501c3 with the mission of improving the quality of life for individuals with MS, Parkinson's disease, and neuromuscular conditions. She is the author of Adaptive Yoga Moves Anybody, a book that I have, created for individuals with MS and neuromuscular conditions, and Adaptive Yoga Cards, daily yoga moves for all ages and abilities. Mindy has provided yoga therapy to individuals with mobility challenges for over 18 years and thrives on building a strong, mighty community for her students and families. She is a qualified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, certified Buteyko breathing instructor, and a Reiki master. She created the widely acclaimed annual virtual holistic health and wellness forum for MS, which is happening right now, and presents for national MS, corporate, and yoga therapy organizations, and has trained hundreds of adaptive yoga instructors. She has a bachelor's of science from Northwestern University and a master of health services administration from the University of Michigan. So once again, please give Miss Mindy Eisenberg a huge round of applause, and of course, all the yogis and practitioners who are up here as well.
Like you're being invaded. Do some breathing. I just want to know, how many of you are ready to take the cold plunge? Raise your hand if you're taking the cold plunge. Oh my, this is way more than I thought. I'm scared cat. But if you guys do it with me, can we organize a group event, Tim? Oh, yes. All right. I'm going to need a lot of support for that one. All right. Well, we're getting situated up here, and I'm going to this thing. Hold on while we get situated, okay? Just breathe. I'm going to add on, I know Tim answered the question, but yoga breathing, there's so many different kinds of yoga breathing. There's not just one. So sometimes we breathe through our nose, sometimes we hold our breath, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast. And that's actually how we can change our energy level, which is pretty cool because you've got that ability right within you. Sorry, we're redecorating. She's going to stay right there. She's got to come in more. Yep. You'll have a seat. All right. So, as you know, we have this mission of providing holistic health and wellness education. We also offer adaptive yoga classes, both virtually, online, recorded, and in person in Michigan. So today, we have vital students who are up here. All of our students who are Yoga Move students are vital. And we'd like to share all of their stories with you because every single one of the Yoga Move students has their own inspiring story to tell you.
In fact, there's someone whose birthday is tomorrow. He knew I was going to do this to him. Can you guys all say happy birthday to Sean? Sean, stand up. That's all right, Sean. You don't have to stand up. I just had to haze him a little bit. All right, so today you're going to learn from 3 very special students about their experience with our community, adaptive yoga, and what it can do for you. We're going to show you a few poses that you will hopefully try and join with us to get moving. So first, I'd like to introduce George. We are so lucky. George, raise your hand so they all know it's George. George has been practicing yoga with Yoga Moves MS for 9 years. He was diagnosed with MS 23 years ago and lives by the acronym AID, Attitude, Diet, and Exercise. He says, adapt and you will achieve. From Jill, extraordinaire Yoga Moves teacher who is here. Jill, where are you? Oh, she's over there. There she is. Give her a big clap. All our teachers, by the way, are extraordinary. She states that he is one of the most disciplined, determined, and positive students I've ever encountered. Nothing stops George. Look at that smile George has. Yoga has given him a vehicle for what he can do in the face of so many obstacles. He's truly an inspiration to everyone around him. His Troy class and his family just love him. Woo-hoo, George! He doesn't have a fan club. George is open to useful suggestions and will be the first to take action. He is on it with a can-do attitude. In fact, we need to congratulate George because he just finished his yoga teacher training. He's now a registered yoga instructor. George, we are thrilled that you are now a member of the Instructor Yoga Moves team. So, George, we have a few questions for you. I'm going to come over there. What aspects of the yoga have you found most beneficial for managing MS symptoms?
I've always had really tight hamstrings and spasticity in my legs and restless leg syndrome. So like the poses, like the a lot of poses like the forward fold, the leg stretch, the seated tree on the earth, anything that works on the hamstrings. So a lot of the poses. And I want to say really quick, thank you to our very own Marcia and Dory, because you inspired me. You inspired me to become a yoga instructor. And I thank you so much. And right back at you, Marcia. And so many other people inspired me. And Mindy, thank you for believing in me. And thank you, Jill, for all the help and all the yoga instructors in the Yoga Moves MS community. And most of all, I want to thank my wife, because everyone knows about the spoon theory, and the fatigue really kicks my butt. And there were a few times I came close to quitting, but my wife said, no, that ain't gonna happen. So yeah, so I want to thank everyone for coming here, and everybody that donates to the cause, and to you. I mean, you guys all mean so much to the community. Thank you. Well, I feel the connection because I know we're not alone. I mean, we all share the same disease, and we're all here for each other to like help each other out. For example, like we want to talk about another, like moving to another a disease modifying treatment or some other kind of medication to help with our symptoms. So we're always here for each other to support each other. And we're much more than just yoga buddies now. we become friends, you know, and this Yoga Moves MS, a community, it means so much to me and a lot of other people too.
Yay, George. Wouldn't you want George to be your teacher? All right. This is so fun. I love showing off students. But now I get to show off another teacher and a special student. You're both special. You're both special. So Kathy was diagnosed 29 years ago with MS and has been a student with Yoga Moves MS for 7 years. You may recognize her because she's famously known as the owner of Mother Mary's Toffee Company. We're blessed to have her in the bad class, which are a bunch of MS warriors and rebels who do work hard and practice hard in person during the Thursday classes. Kathy often arrives first to class with a positive attitude and a smile. I should tell you, she does that even when she'll say to me, you know, I'm not feeling good. I'm not sure I'm going to make it to class. And then she shows up with that smile. She's hardworking, and you can see how strong she's become from her routine of Pilates, yoga, and physical therapy throughout the week. She was a regular in the beginning of starting our classes, and now she says emphatically that she will not miss it. She loves the stretching, but laughing is even more important to her. Tell you a little bit about Deborah, who's standing with Kathy. Deborah is an important member of the Yoga Moves instructor team and partners with Kathy one-on-one during and within our small group classes. She's been practicing yoga since 2006, embracing the mind, body, breath experience as a way to cultivate a strong physical, mental, and emotional state of being. We are fortunate that she has been a teacher with us for 12 years. She's one of the most competent teachers I know and soft-spoken, but don't let that fool you. Listen carefully, because she's smart, funny, and has a witty sense of humor. Okay, Miss Kathy, your questions. How do instructors and fellow participants accommodate and support each other individual needs and abilities during a class?
To me, the instructors are the most dedicated, supportive, and compassionate people that I know. They're the most dedicated, supportive, and compassionate people that I know. They work with the students, and no matter what the ability or disability, they work with you and only give positive information back to you. I need to give special recognition to my dear friend here, Deborah. She works with me exclusively, and I would not be where I am if it were not without her. So I want to thank all the teachers, and I think all the students in the room understand how important our teachers are, and I want to just thank everybody, all of them. So maybe we give a special round of applause for the teachers.
Yes, every single one of our teachers is a gem. And they all come with different backgrounds, by the way. Deborah has an MBA. You are a recreational therapist. Kathy's an engineer. Marcia was it respiratory therapy? Cardiovascular tech. Oh my goodness. Everybody's got a different background, these yoga teachers, but that's what makes it fun and creative. Kathy, what would you say to someone who is hesitant or unsure about trying yoga with Yoga Moves MS?
I was hesitant for a long time. I thought that I couldn't do yoga, or that everybody would make fun of me, or for whatever reason, I just didn't do it. When I started, I realized how wrong I had been. They are the most non-judgmental group of people, from teachers to other students. Everybody loves everybody. I love the teachers. I love the students, and we work together hand in hand. And I would highly recommend just give it a try. You won't be disappointed.
Yay, Kathy. Thank you so much. And by the way, she shares toffee with us around the holidays. All right. Leah, right here. I've known Leah since the early years of her MS diagnosis, which is going on 17 years. She's a dedicated wife and mother, and we're all fortunate in the MS community and beyond that she serves as a leader and volunteer in her free time. In fact, she's one of the top fundraisers for the MS Society and has been a vital committee member of our Holistic Health and Wellness Forums for MS since their conception. She's one of the reasons that you are at this fabulous program today. Leah also helps us with Yoga Moves strategic planning, and we were proud to honor her last fall at our Party with a Purpose. Leah strives toward finding that balance between the symptoms of MS, such as pain and fatigue, the need for rest and recover, and the unpredictability of MS. With perseverance and a big heart, Leah always wants to give more, and she's here to share with you today. We have a question for Leah. Do you find that sharing experiences and tips with others in the class enhances your journey with MS? How would you say it does?
I mean, it's one of the special gifts that the Yoga Moves MS classes provide. It's what gets me out of bed on the Thursday and go to the bad class. I could attend
that bad class. Are they really bad?
No, they're not. They're
great. Come on. They love being called bad. You got to say, yeah. They earn their reputation.
Bad. But I could probably go and suffer through a regular yoga class. But when I walk into Yoga Moves, I don't, it's a safe space. You know, how many of you walk into a space and people say to you, how are you doing? And, you know, you say, yeah, I'm great, because you don't want to start that long list. Well, in these classes, I can walk in and I'll see that someone's not doing well. And just through the conversation of talking with someone that's had shared struggles and challenges as I can is just a pick me up. It's, you know, going in and having Mindy talk in the beginning and saying, you know, what do we want to work on today? And she talks about pain, and she's like, who's in pain? You know, and Sean and I both raise our hands. You know, I'm not alone. I'm experiencing the same things. MS, as you all know, is a disease where, you know, you probably don't share the same symptoms as the person that you know with MS. But in these classes, you know, you're encouraged to share. You're encouraged to vent. You're encouraged. The second reason I really like the classes is because we start out as a class starting the regular Yoga Moves, but then the teachers help us to individually work on what we're experiencing right now. If I'm having pain in my legs, but yet George is having pain or having problems with spasms, they'll give us different yoga moves to work on those. And the benefit for me is I can go home then and continue working on them because I have the blocks, I have the mat. It's very easy to do that. So that's another reason. The other thing is Yoga Moves classes are really accessible in all parts of Southeast Michigan. So you'll check out the website, and just as Kathy said, I would definitely stop thinking about it and actually take a chance and do it. It's so exciting when we have a new student come into the bad class, which we just did. And he was actually a yogi, and he started out, you know, he was really tight. By the end of the class, Kathy had him doing what pose?
What was that pose, Mark?
what was he doing at that? I mean, just some incredible pose, and you could see how excited he was that he could actually go back and do a pose that he wouldn't imagine. And you could just see he was back for, to continue the classes.
Thank you, Leah. That was beautiful. Kathy wants to say one more thing. We don't want her not to sleep. She needs to say it.
The last thing I'd like to say is that yoga is not just about the practice of yoga. When you leave there, you feel like you are lifted both physically and mentally. It is the very best medicine you can take. And there's no adverse side effects.
Well, we'd like to do a little bit of moving before we move on with any questions. Because you guys have been sitting a while, right? So you're going to see how we have 3 different students in 3 different bodies who are going to do variations on the same movement. And we hope that you're going to do it with us, right? Excellent. Q says excellent. All right. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do a sun salute. You guys can do this with us. Stand up, sit down, do whatever. You guys online too. You're not out of this just because we can't see you. So yoga's about breathing. Let's take our arms up overhead without knocking your arms into somebody or something. Awesome. And then exhale. You're going to take your hands to your hips. Lean your spine forward. Good. Take your hands to your thighs. If you're standing, bend your knees, round your spine for cat pose. And then you're going to inhale and circle your shoulders up and back. And maybe lift your arms forward. Beautiful. Push down through your feet, whether you're seated or you're standing. Inhale, rise up. Awesome. Exhale, hands at your heart. That is a sun salute. We salute you. All right. One more pose. One more pose. It's a warrior pose. So this can be done seated or standing. So you're going to take your feet wide. I know you guys are in street clothes, but it's okay. It's okay. Feet are wide. Push your feet down like you mean it. Like you mean it. Then you're going to turn your right toes out. Yep, you're going to bend your knee over your right ankle and heel. You are strong warriors. Strong MS warriors. Then extend your arms out in a T, one or both arms. Good. Are you breathing? I'm not sure you guys are breathing. Take an inhale and an exhale. Such strength, such strength. I'm feeling it through the internet and in this room. All right, come on out of it. Straighten the right leg. Yeah, bring your feet together. I saw that, a little wiggle. You might jiggle your hips around. You know what? We can't be lopsided. You're going to have to do the other side. I said one pose, but we have to do the other side. So big, wide stance. Big, wide stance. And then you're going to take your left toes out towards the left and bend your left knee over the ankle and heel. Now, notice there's 3 different poses here. They're all warrior variations. They're all perfect. There's either everything is perfect in yoga or nothing is. And everything is perfect. You are perfect in your warrior poses. Gaze over your left fingertips like you mean it. Like you mean it. You're peaceful warriors. You're peaceful. You could attack, but you're not going to because you're peaceful. Take a breath in and a breath out. Bring your feet back forward and towards each other. So how about it? Let's say thank you to namaste to our 3 wonderful special students that came up here today. Look at George. He's got this huge smile. Any questions? Is there a second mic? No. Any questions in the audience, online or in this room? How many of you are going to start doing adaptive yoga? You better raise your hands. Don't just sit there. I'm not kidding. You're not getting dessert unless you raise your hands. I am not kidding. Everybody raise their hands up. Yes, you can do it. You can do it.
Caregivers are encouraged to come. The only problem is you can't sit on the sidelines. You have to join in. So be ready to join in our class.
Nobody sits on the sidelines. Hey, are you guys all breathing? Yes, you are? Well, then you're already doing the foundation of yoga. We'll see you in class. Right, Sean? You guys can all come and sing happy birthday to Sean tomorrow.
Let's give them all another round of applause, please. Or should we say namaste? Namaste. Oh, and by the way, once the shoes come off, they're not going back on. I have MS, so. Is everyone feeling stretched out and warrior-like? That ends that way. I'm going to ask this question again. Are we feeling stretched out and warrior-like? All right, much better, much better. I like that. Up next, Dr. Jonathan Rosenthal is a board-certified neurologist in New York City. He completed his Bachelor of Science degree in neuroscience at NYU, his Doctor of Medicine at NYU School of Medicine, his residency in neurology and position as chief resident at NYU Hospital, Bellevue Hospital, and the Manhattan VA, and is currently completing a fellowship in clinical neurophysiology at Weill Cornell School of Medicine and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. His work on TBI was recognized by the American Academy of Neurology Young Investigator Award. He is an avid yoga student of Sri Dharma Mitra. He is passionate about understanding yoga interventions in medicine and hosts the Neuroscience and Yoga Online Conference annually during Brain Awareness Week to help people everywhere understand and apply the current science of how yoga affects the brain. Please welcome Dr. Rosenthal, who is joining us virtually from New York and speaking about research on yoga interventions for MS. Welcome, Dr. Rosenthal.
Hello, everyone there in Illinois. Are you able to hear me well? Maybe, I don't know, someone just show me a thumbs up if you can hear me well. Okay, I see some thumbs up from people online, so I think that means it's a thing. Is everyone able to see my slides? Actually, I can see my slides on your screen, so I think we're good. All right, if there are any issues, please let me know as we go. But thank you for that kind introduction. It is so nice to be here presenting. And thank you to Mindy and the whole Yoga Moves MS team. You guys are amazing. You're doing awesome work, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope you'll get a lot of scientific insight and inspiration and practical tips out of this presentation. And as was mentioned, I'm presenting live from New York. And I just have to say, the reason I'm so excited about this and the reason I am so passionate about understanding how yoga affects the brain is we live in a time when science misinformation runs rampant, especially on the internet. And so my mission here is to really share high quality scientific data and reasoning so that you can sift through some of that noise and truly understand what the scientific literature is saying about yoga. And so the title of this talk is Yoga and Multiple Sclerosis. And it's just important to say this. I have no financial disclosures. I don't own any stock in yoga companies. I do sell some educational material related to neuroscience and yoga, but of course that's optional and not required for you to attend this lecture. Okay. So an overview of what we're going to go over so you can have your expectations well calibrated. So we'll go over quickly what really is yoga, what are the core components of yoga, and how does that change when we talk about yoga in scientific research. And then we'll dive into some specific components of the MS population. So symptoms and things that people with MS deal with, and how yoga has been studied for them. And then finally, we'll end with some limitations and practical takeaways and where to learn more. And I hope to leave time for questions, so I'm going to be as efficient as possible. But yeah, as you're going through, as you're listening to this presentation, please jot down your questions. Okay, so let's start with an introduction to yoga. So when you think of yoga, what comes to mind? I think you just had a yoga session before this, but just think in your head, what does yoga look like to you? Well, when I Google this, this is what I get. And this is really just fit young people in tight pants. This is not really what yoga is. And so just to be very clear about what yoga is, it is an ancient practice that was initially designed to bring health, mental sharpness, and ultimately a settled mind so that the practitioner could shift their identification from the body and mind to something called the higher self, which is like the nectar of consciousness. And yoga came about in parallel to Hinduism and Buddhism, but yoga itself is a secular practice, and the goal is self-realization. And fitting with that, there are 8 components of yoga, and these are those 8 main parts as first described by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, probably written in the 400 CE or AD. And so those 8 components are ethical rules, so how you treat other people, and those include compassion and truthfulness, non-stealing, and then also how you treat yourself. So these are the personal observances, which include discipline and cleanliness and contentment and devotion and an element of surrender in everything you do. And people are very surprised to learn this about yoga, right? People really associate yoga primarily with the postures, maybe the breath control, and also meditation, right? But leading up to meditation, there is withdrawal from the senses, which is kind of directing your attention inwards, sustaining your attention, so concentrating on something, and then even sustaining that for a long time, which is when it becomes meditation. And that's ultimately how someone achieves that state of union. Okay, so just to emphasize, yoga really doesn't look like those pictures. And looking at these practices, you can really see that yoga is supposed to be for everybody. And there are ways to adapt yoga to everyone. There's chair yoga for people who may have mobility limitations. There's yoga that's just singing. This is called bhakti yoga. There's also yoga that's going around doing good deeds for people. This is called karma yoga. And so there's really meant to be a type of yoga available to everyone in every age group and with every disease type. In the scientific literature, this changes a little bit. It's not all of those components that get represented in the interventions. So usually in the scientific literature, yoga is defined by postures, breathing, relaxation, and meditation. And this is changing to some extent where some of those philosophical elements are included. But this is important to state because now we know any of the results I'm going to go over included these 4. And so these 4, when put together, lead to the effects we're going to go over. And with regards to the MS population, it's actually really, really important to talk about this also because for the longest time, like maybe up until the 1980s and 1990s, it was actually recommended for patients with multiple sclerosis to rest, to not participate in exercise. And this is because of kind of a misapplication of this phenomenon called Uthoff's phenomenon. Is everyone familiar with Uthoff's phenomenon? I can't really hear you, so I won't get the feedback to know. But so Uthos phenomenon is when heat exacerbates MS symptoms. So sometimes patients with MS will go out into a hot summer day and really feel their fatigue, their pain, their spasticity worsen in that setting. It could even be a hot shower, but usually it's heat that triggers this. And so the thought was exercise makes you heat up, so it might trigger Uthos phenomenon, and so we should not recommend exercise for patients with MS. And of course, like hot yoga or heated exercises could really do that. But the research has really, really changed to the point now that tolerable exercise is universally recommended for patients with MS. And then the last thing to note about yoga in the scientific literature is that these practices have been found to be safe with minimal risk of harm. So the last thing you want to do is recommend yoga to someone and actually worsen, maybe even trigger an exacerbation of multiple sclerosis. But that has never been reported. I have seen some case reports of people getting severely injured. So these are usually like the New York Times had something about this, but obviously that wasn't in the scientific literature. But there are some case reports in the scientific literature of people doing very extreme postures without really, guidance from a teacher, and then getting fractures of bones or tearing of blood vessels, right? And so those are really severe adverse outcomes. But when yoga is studied in randomized controlled trials taught by a well-credentialed teacher, I've never seen a severe adverse outcome. I've seen minor things like soreness and temporary joint pain come up, but I've never seen a severe injury. Okay, so with that, I think we're ready to dive into yoga and multiple sclerosis. We know what yoga looks like in the scientific literature. We know that yoga is safe, and we know that there's burgeoning research on exercise in multiple sclerosis. So let's talk about yoga. So customizing yoga for patients with multiple sclerosis is really important. About 60 to 80% of patients with MS have limited mobility. There may be trouble walking, and there may be chronic pain. And then many also have mental health symptoms. So depression, anxiety. So that's anywhere between 20 and 60%, depending on which study you look at. And if you ask patients with multiple sclerosis, 60% of them are using complementary and alternative medicine techniques like yoga to help with symptoms. And many of them are very convinced of its effects. And so we really owe it to our patients to understand what yoga is actually doing. So this is just taken, this is like a screenshot from PubMed, which is one of the main databases on scientific literature. And you can see from 1994 to 2024, and there were no studies before 1994, there are 112 total studies published on yoga and multiple sclerosis. In 2023, there were 11 studies added to this. And I have to say, most of them are really low quality. And so it seems like 112 studies might be a lot, but there's not much meaningful information to be gleaned from that. And I actually won't even report most of these 112 studies because I don't have confidence in their results. This is compared to yoga literature in general. And so you can see that yoga literature is way more developed than just the literature on multiple sclerosis and yoga. In 2023, there were 853 studies published on yoga. And the total, this is showing 8,300. Another database shows it's 15,000. So there's a ton of literature out there in the scientific repertoire about yoga. And same problem, there are many studies that are low quality, but when you have this high a number, there are going to be some good ones, right? So just to contextualize these two pictures, multiple sclerosis represents less than 1% of the total literature on yoga. And so to really apply yoga to the multiple sclerosis population, we have to extrapolate a bit. I can't give you studies for everything that will always be for multiple sclerosis patients. So we're going to be kind of pulling from some of this bigger yoga literature. Okay. And of course, there are some downsides to that, which we'll talk about. So now we can go over some specific topics. So the first one is one that I'm sure everyone is very, it's all over the news. It's all over the place all the time, mental health and stress. And it's an exploding topic. Just last year, in 2023, there were 218 scientific studies published on yoga and stress and mental health. And this brings the total to over 1,900. And it makes sense. Stress is really prevalent in our lives, and it makes the cover of leading magazines because of this. So I just have to ask you, how do you define stress? So when you hear stress, what do you think of? And I would love to hear what everyone is thinking, but I don't think it'll work, and I don't think we have time for it anyway. But just take another 10 seconds, think, what does stress mean to you? Okay, well, according to the scientific literature, and I think this is really going to change your view on stress, stress is about deploying resources. And it is a brain-determined process that affects the whole body with the goal of adaptation. And so this picture is a summary of how the stress system works. And you'll notice the whole goal is adaptation. And this is from one of my favorite review papers on stress physiology. So at the top, we have stressors, which are kind of the triggers that activate the stress system. And physical stressors can include things like infections, injuries, or hunger. And psychological stressors can include things like deadlines, financial strain, or grief. And both of them are kind of calculated in the brain to determine how many resources should I deploy for this. And then that is communicated to the body through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis or the sympathetic adrenal medullary axis. And this one is really a hormonal system. This one ends in cortisol. And this one is really a nervous system, like it operates through nerves. And so this one is very, very fast. And then from there, it targets every organ in the body and also feeds back into the brain. And so in the body, it can change things like energy metabolism, the immune system, digestion, reproduction. In the brain, it can affect things like changing what proteins are expressed, how they are put in membranes, how new parts of cells are built, even the immune system of the brain. And all of this ultimately affects how neurons fire and how they are plastic, so how they are able to change. And again, all of that feeds into ultimately adaptation, so adjusting to that stressor and surviving. And so when we're thinking about stress, we really want to measure every part of this. And that's why I'm showing you this, so that you see like, okay, these are the kind of like check boxes we need to go off as we're thinking about how yoga might affect stress. And stress really does matter. It has enormous impacts on our health. The literature on that is, unequivocal, and I think we all experience that. But at the same time, stress can also be really, really good. I mean, you hear in the common parlance like good stress and bad stress. Well, good stress is the stress that results in adaptation, and bad stress is the one that actually is maladaptive and ultimately impairs function. And at its worst, it can result in psychiatric diseases like anxiety and depression, most commonly, but also medical diseases like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, and strokes. And for patients with multiple sclerosis, they often describe that stress is a trigger for not necessarily a flare of MS, like a new immune attack, but just like an exacerbation of symptoms. So when we look closer at the brain, thinking about how the brain is deciding what is stressful and what is not, this is the network that really seems to be responsible for that. And I just want to make sure everyone is taking notes because there's a quiz on this at the end. I'm just kidding. There's no quiz. But the point of this complicated slide is just to impress on you that each line of this diagram is someone's whole PhD. Like they could dedicate their whole career to just understanding one of these lines. So this is decades of work put together trying to understand how the brain determines what is stressful. And what we know about yoga, and I'll show you some of these data, is that it seems to be really working in how parts of the brain like the prefrontal cortex communicate with other parts of the brain like the amygdala to determine what is stressful. And in other words, it's like goal-oriented reasoning is able to dampen down the stress response. Of course, other interventions do this too, like psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy and so many more. And it's important to compare yoga to those to really know how effective yoga is, and you'll see some of those studies. But one thing to note is yoga is a lot cheaper than therapy. Okay, so this is the first study we're going to look at. And this is a meta-analysis, which is the highest level of evidence in science. And what it does is it mathematically combines many other studies to come to one conclusion. Now, when you're doing this, you have to choose the studies carefully. You have to choose good studies, because if you choose bad studies, we just say it's garbage in, garbage out. So this meta-analysis, they were very careful to include only high-quality studies that compared yoga to an active control. So comparing yoga to something like health education, stretching, psychotherapy, or aerobic exercise. And they looked at many of the measures of stress from the diagram we were looking at before. So cortisol, blood pressure, heart rate variability, fasting blood glucose, cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein. And they ultimately included 42 studies in their analysis. And so what did they find? Well, I'm just presenting a summary. So the whole paper looks like this, and I didn't want to overwhelm your eyes with too many of these charts, but there were significant effects found on perceived stress score, which is kind of like a subjective measure of stress. So really suggesting that at the brain level, there were changes. Waking cortisol, so that was that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis system. Interleukin-6, which is a measure of inflammation and kind of the immune system in the body. Mean arterial pressure, so a measure of blood pressure. Fasting blood glucose, a measure of metabolism, along with LDL, low-density lipoprotein, and triglycerides. And so all of these together really support that this whole stress system is affected by yoga. And even more important to note about this meta-analysis is that they included a broad range of population. So they didn't have a study dedicated to MS in the sample, but in addition to healthy people, they also had people with depression, people with anxiety, people with cancer, people with GI illnesses, people with heart disease, and so many more, which really suggests that these observed effects are not specific to a particular population and that they really are generalizable. Also, these effects are greater than the active controls. So most commonly, that was exercise, therapy, or health education. And so yoga seems to be more effective than those. So yeah, really powerful study. And we were talking a little bit about how yoga probably works by affecting brain networks. Well, this is one of the best systematic reviews of all the literature on neuroimaging in yoga. And I'm going to summarize this slide quickly. There's a lot going on here, but it really is supporting what we were talking about before. So they measure not only structural changes in the brain, but also functional changes. So in other words, they looked at not only the size of different brain regions, but also how much blood flow they were getting or how much glucose they were taking up with different imaging techniques, and really showed that yoga increased activity in those frontal parts of the brain, which then resulted in them even growing in some instances, and then suppressed activity in some of those stress networks like the amygdala. And again, in certain instances, the amygdala was smaller. And so this really supports this model of yoga working on these networks in the brain and then all of stress physiology following. And if we apply this to mental health, this is from a review paper really from a while ago, and there are even more studies now, but this systematic review and meta-analysis is pretty powerful, showing that for depression, yoga compared to usual care, so psychotherapy and medication, yoga was more effective. Yoga versus relaxation, yoga was more effective. Yoga versus aerobic exercise, yoga was more effective. And for anxiety, yoga versus usual care, yoga was just as effective, and yoga versus relaxation, yoga was more effective. And so really powerful findings that all suggest that across a broad range of populations, yoga affects the stress physiology, and this can have benefits for mental health. Okay, but those were all studies that had people doing yoga a few times a week for 6 to 24 weeks. So what they do in this review paper is they're looking at only a single practice. So doing yoga once for 30 to 60 minutes, and they show that yoga actually reduces stress reactivity, meaning that yoga was protective against future stressors, just a single session. And the last thing I want to show you from this stress and mental health work is, does it matter if you like yoga? And what they did in this study is they had people in two groups, either the ones who got to choose whether they did yoga or not, and the ones who were forced to. And what they showed is that it didn't matter. Whether you were forced to do yoga or you chose to do yoga, the outcomes were the same. So it doesn't really seem to matter if people like it. Okay, so just a reminder, please jot down your questions. We'll move on to yoga and fatigue. And I promise the next few sections are a bit faster. So this is really one of the only things we have on yoga and fatigue right now. And fatigue is a really common symptom in multiple sclerosis. And for this review paper from Holger Kramer, they are comparing yoga versus usual care, which is, usual care was just continue what you're doing in the studies, don't change anything, and comparing it to aerobic exercise. And you see that yoga was better than not really doing anything else, but it was just as effective as aerobic exercise. Okay, and now yoga and pain. So the published research in the MS population is so weak that I'm actually not willing to present any of the studies. There are other studies published on yoga and pain, and there are pretty significant effects on low back pain, neck pain, migraine, but these are so different than the central neuropathic pain like trigeminal neuralgia and others that come with multiple sclerosis that I really don't think it's generalizable. So we don't have good evidence right now on yoga for pain. Though, of course, you could extrapolate and say, if yoga improves stress and improves sleep and other features in multiple sclerosis, it might improve pain. Those are all speculative. Okay, so now cognition. So this is where we can talk about some really interesting things. And I'm going to present mostly on the population in general rather than a multiple sclerosis specific population, but these are likely generalizable. So we'll start with working memory. And working memory is really what you experience when you're trying to remember a phone number or keep something in mind, for a short time. And one way to measure this is this test called the NBAC. And so this study from Dr. Neha Goethe was using the NBAC and comparing yoga to aerobic exercise. And what they found was that as the NBAC got more difficult, so 1 is more difficult than 0, 2 is more difficult than 1, yoga really stood out. And compared to aerobic exercise and their baseline, people who were in the yoga group had faster reaction times and higher accuracy on this test, the NBAC. And they later did a follow-up study showing that this was related to stress. So people who had more stress reduction, so improvements in stress, had more improvements in these cognitive tasks. And this is really important for the MS population. So one of the main deficits in cognition and multiple sclerosis is actually processing speed because of the white matter damage that comes from the attacks. And so it kind of makes the argument like, oh, it's improving reaction time. Could that be helpful for processing speed in multiple sclerosis? Of course, we need more research to say that part for sure. And the NBAC really relies on the prefrontal cortex. So all working memory relies on the prefrontal cortex, and that comes from this study from 1971 that I won't spend too much time on. And what this really tells us is, again, that yoga is really working on these prefrontal cortical networks if it's helping the NBAC. And this is, we talked about the NBAC, but there are many other measures of what we call fluid intelligence, of which working memory is a part. And just in an aging population, working memory tends to decline. So you can see as people age, this is just normal, healthy controls. Their fluid intelligence declines with age. And in this study, they looked at yogis, which is this top line, and meditators, and basically showed that their fluid intelligence declined less, such that people in their 60s who were yogis and meditators looked more like people who were in their 40s who were not practicing yoga or meditating. They also did another analysis in the same paper where they built a model of the brain, and I'm not going to get into this too much, and they just sampled what would happen if you damaged one part at a time. And the yogi and the meditator brains held up to that damage better. And so they were suggesting that according to this model, brain resilience was improved by these practices. And you could see how this would apply to a multiple sclerosis population. So if there's damage to particular regions with attacks, with multiple sclerosis attacks, having this brain resilience would be really helpful. In terms of long-term memory, so long-term memory occurs when this part of the brain, the hippocampus, recognizes the co-occurrence of many different features across the rest of the brain and then connects them. So it might say, oh, if this person is in this location at this time, it means that they want a donut. I don't know why I came up with that example, but this whole process of encoding, so recognizing that connection and then retrieving and ultimately consolidating it. Consolidating means you actually store it among connections in the brain independently of the hippocampus. All of this depends on being able to pay attention to the things you're trying to remember, and then consolidation really depends on getting good sleep. And the study that I'm showing here is from people I know personally, Julia Basso and Alexandra McHale, and they did this study where they randomized people to either listen to a podcast or do a meditation every day. And the people in the meditation group had significantly improved memory scores compared to the control. And if we look at this on a molecular level, there's this signaling molecule, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is responsible for many of the neuroplasticity changes that happen in the brain. And if we look at this molecule in people who practice yoga, so this was a very intense yoga study. They had people practicing 6 days a week. I think it was, I forget how many months, 3 or 6 months. It was a very long time. It was 3 months. I have it written down. And so what they showed here is that brain-derived neurotrophic factor was much higher after doing the yoga intervention, such that the people in their 40s and 50s looked like people in their 20s. Again, kind of like that 20-year improvement that we saw before with the fluid intelligence. And this also manifests anatomically, so similar to that neuroimaging paper we looked at before. This was actually one of the studies included in that. And they showed that with yoga practice, the left hippocampus, which was much larger, again, suggesting that long-term memory could be improved. And if we look at this with regard specifically to the MS population, for cognition, there were really only 2 studies that were done, and there doesn't seem to be any difference between yoga and exercise because these lines overlap, though there may be a trend. We need more studies to really get the definitive answer on this. In terms of quality of life, this is a huge mess, and I don't think we have great data on yoga improving quality of life for patients with MS, though, of course, anecdotally, many people report that. But this study is all over the place, and you can see how many different analyses they did. So anytime you have a study where they're doing the same analysis multiple times, comparing things, you just increase the chances of false positives when you do that. And so I'm a little bit skeptical of this one. The last one I'll show is yoga and neurogenic bladder. So neurogenic bladder, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is when damage to the nervous system causes dysfunction of the bladder. And this dysfunction is usually that the bladder cannot contract well enough to get urine out. And so people have urinary incontinence when it kind of overflows. And so what they showed here is they actually measured how much urine was in the bladder with an ultrasound, and they measure this thing called post-void residual, so how much urine is left after you urinate. And normally it should be very little, but with neurogenic bladder, it's much higher. And so you can see before they did the yoga intervention, there was a lot of urine left in the bladder, and then after the yoga intervention, there was less. This is a very weak study with a small sample size and no control group, but it's really all we have for this important topic. And for the sake of time, I'll skip this. So, okay, I just have to emphasize, you can see we need a lot more research on yoga for MS currently. So I hope you'll leave this talk with a passion for advocating for that. And of all the studies I presented, no one study is perfect. Many had small samples, many had not diverse enough samples, many of them are even biased. And this is really true in the MS literature where so many of them don't even have a control group. And so it's really hard to study yoga in the MS population right now. I'm just going to get right to the point. So there are a few practical takeaways that I think we can take from what I've shown you. And so the main components of yoga in scientific studies include postures held for 30 to 90 seconds each, slow and controlled breathing, relaxation, and meditation. And they varied that from 6 to 24 weeks. In the general population, but not as well studied in MS specifically, there's mounting evidence that yoga positively affects stress physiology at every level, including the brain networks that determine stress, the outputs of stress, so cortisol in the autonomic nervous system, and the health results of stress, so blood pressure, inflammation, depression, and anxiety. And then there were even acute effects where a single class was sufficient to reduce stress reactivity. Whether a practitioner chose to do yoga or is assigned to does not make it less effective. There's growing evidence that yoga improves working memory, so those frontal lobe networks. There is also growing evidence that yoga improves long-term memory and biomarkers of long-term memory. And then yoga improves fatigue as much as aerobic exercise does. The data on quality of life are mixed with yoga, and there's weak early data on yoga for neurogenic bladder. Ooh, okay, I tried to give you as much a summary of the literature as I could in 25 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me. I hope I've given you a fair summary. I don't want you to think of yoga as a magic pill or a panacea. It definitely has quantifiable, demonstrable benefits, and it's making its way into the guidelines for many diseases like migraine and cancer. We still have a lot of work before before yoga is in the guidelines for MS. And I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you listening and finding interest in this. Please reach out to me at any point if you have any questions. I think the organizers of the conference will have my contact information. And these are the first page of references and the second page of references. And I welcome any questions. Yeah, so I see one question online about what type of yoga was in some of the studies, and it's variable. So every single study had different yoga interventions. So different styles of yoga like Iyengar, Hatha Raja, Vinyasa, right? So there's all these different schools and style of yoga, and it almost doesn't matter. Whichever one people do, it seems to have the same effect. So, sometimes people are always asking, what's the one posture, what's the breathing exercise I need to do to improve my whatever it is? And, we just don't have those answers. And it seems like as long as you're doing yoga, so postures, breathing, relaxation, meditation, it seems to work.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any questions for Dr. Rosenthal?
So Chantal is asking, what can we, the attendees of this webinar and in person, do to help the research on MS? And that's an excellent, excellent question. So I don't have a great answer, but I think we live in an age of brain research. Yes, I can repeat it. What can we, the attendees of this webinar and in person, do to help the research on MS? And I don't have a great answer, but we live in a time where the funding is really determined by national organizations. And so it comes down to advocating for it at a national level. You can write for people and say you want more funding for studying complementary and alternative medicine in multiple sclerosis. There's a body of the NIH called the NCCIH. I always forget what it stands for, but it's like the National Complementary Something Something Institute of Health. And they can definitely help direct more funds. And we also need more researchers interested in it who are willing to do the work to actually conduct the research. So if you're willing to pursue more education and do that, I think that would be awesome.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Rosenthal? Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
to have you here.
Sorry it was such a whirlwind. I know it was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me.
Let's give Dr. Rosenthal one more round of applause. All right. And up next, we are rounding home plate. All right. Dr. Jeannie Cote is the lifelong resident of the state of Michigan. She completed her undergraduate studies at Michigan State University with a degree in nutritional science. She then attended Wayne State University Medical School in Detroit and completed her neurology residency at the University of Michigan, serving as chief resident. Dr. Cote completed a fellowship at the University of Michigan in multiple sclerosis neuroimmunology. After spending several years caring for patients at the Multiple Sclerosis Clinic at the University of Michigan, she transitioned to Memorial Healthcare Institute for Neuroscience in Owasso, Michigan in 2019. Dr. Cote has special interest in the planning, prenatal, and postnatal care for women with multiple sclerosis and lifestyle and weight management related to neurologic disease. Dr. Cote holds certification in medical acupuncture as well as obesity medicine by the ABOM. Dr. Cote is board certified in neurology and is a member of the American Academy of Neurology, the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, and the Academy of Pain Research. And I have to say that I've marked 10 years with MS, and I have to thank Dr. Cote for being my physician and neurologist. So please welcome Dr. Cote, who is speaking on the subject of MS and weight loss.
Can you guys hear me okay? I really like that intro. I sound amazing. Thank you to everybody for sticking it out. I know it's a long day. Hi to my patients. Hi to my patients online. Great to have you all here. So most of my time is spent on MS, but along the way, I sort of also migrated back to my roots in nutrition and lifestyle. And, you know, I'm working in a time where we're also getting a lot of advancements with obesity medicine. And I just found it this perfect merger between MS and neurologic disease and weight, because really a lot of this is a brain-based disease, and I think falls under the scope of neurology. And eventually everybody will agree with me too. We're just convincing them bit by bit. So the talk today is going to be about weight loss and MS. So to get everybody on the same page, I thought we would start with a little bit of definition. So first one, overweight. What is it to be overweight? So overweight is a condition of excessive fat deposits. Obesity is a chronic complex disease defined by excessive fat deposits that can impair health. This is really important because I think a lot of people will think obesity and they'll picture a person in their mind. That's not what obesity is. Obesity is a chronic disease. It is the disease of fat tissue where fat tissue is not responding correctly within the body. And we have to start thinking about it as a disease so that we can treat, and like any chronic illness, treat it correctly. So there's not a lot of definitions. This is really the only boring slide. And then lastly, we refer to fat deposits as adipose tissue. So sometimes you'll hear the word adipose, that means fat tissue. So right now, we use something called the BMI to get a guesstimate of if our body is a normal weight or an elevated weight for height. So this is a BMI chart. And on the bottom, you'll see height. And then on the side here, you'll see weight. So if you map me out, I'm 5'2", and I go all the way up. Is there a pointer on this? Haha. So I'm 5'2", and I come in right about here. So I am willingly, openly sharing this information. But I'm going to fall in the overweight category based on my height in size. And that's the formal formula that we use for this. This is not a perfect formula though, because if you carry a ton of muscle, you may have very little body fat and your BMI would suggest that you're overweight or have obesity. And I also love The Rock. He is my favorite. And he's a good example, right? So if you did his calculation, he would come out as obese. Clearly, this man does not have a lot of body fat. So the BMI is a starting point, but it is not always a very sensitive number. So another way that we will look to get a sense of what someone's body is made of is with these body analyzers. So these are really cool. You stand on this little foot platform here. You hold on to the handles, and it takes about 30 seconds. It passes a current through you, and it measures you. And it tells you in each body segment how much muscle, how much fat, how much water. These can be really helpful in really looking inside a person and beyond a number on a scale. Because you all know you can go to a wedding, eat at a buffet, put on 4 pounds in a weekend, right? Half that salt and water and pizza and cake and all of that. And that's not all going to necessarily be clearly represented by the scale because the scale is an insensitive number. These are the types of pieces of information that help us really chronicle really what a body is doing through a weight loss journey beyond just a scale that may not be that accurate. Or if you're working out and you're putting on muscle and you know this because your clothes are fitting differently, but the scale hasn't budged. Again, this is a way for us to look inside and say, well, how much, fat is still there? How much muscle is there? Are you putting on muscle? So these are really great also just in general to get a good baseline of what your muscle status is and use it as a tracking point. I like data. So getting this kind of data and then say going to physical therapy, doing some exercises, watching your numbers improve can be really, really encouraging. So we have this body analyzer at Memorial. It's about $10-15. You just walk in, you can have it done, takes 30 seconds. They keep track. These types of scanners are all over the place. So it's not hard to find one, but if you're looking to have it done, we have one. So this report here is, you'll see here, breaking it down by muscle, fat, weight. It's giving you how much skeletal muscle and how much of that is fat. So for someone who's 135 pounds, 47 was fat, 47 was muscle. And it gives you something nice right here called the BMR, or the basal metabolic rate. And we'll talk a bit more about that. And you'll see here, it's really mapping things out by body segment, which is also really helpful. Most people, if you're right hand dominant, you're gonna have a little more muscle in that right arm than you would the left side. So why do we have to care about any of this? And when you think about how having dysfunctional adipose tissue, too much adipose tissue, and adipose tissue that's not behaving correctly, right? We said obesity is a chronic disease. It's dysregulation of adipose tissue. Some of it's easy, right? High blood pressure, cholesterol, prediabetes. Your primary care doctors have probably lectured you about some of this stuff. But there's other things too. So in my world, it correlates with sleep apnea. MS already, causes sleep disorders. So that is something that takes, some of our time and focus, making sure we're looking for sleep disorders. Losing weight can treat sleep apnea. Cancer is linked with obesity. And I talk about this one because in the world of MS, a lot of conversation is spent around cancer risk with MS treatments. And how does this treatment impact my cancer risk? But really, there are many risk factors for cancer. The risk related to treatment is very tiny. And I think the risk related to other parts of our life is actually going to have greater impact. And this is one area that we should be thinking about. So infertility, if somebody is carrying a lot of fat tissue, it's producing hormones. It can mess with menstrual cycles and fertility. But it also does good things, right? It's insulation, it's cushioning, right? We have fat in our abdominal cavity to protect our organs. We don't want our organs to get whacked in a fall and get injured, right? So fat is a cushion, and it's an energy reservoir. So in times where there's not enough food, we can burn our fat to sustain our needs. So it's not to say that fat is evil, but you want to have healthy fat and the right amount of fat. So real quick, as far as cancers linked to obesity, this is a good example of what that cancer list looks like. And you'll notice really important ones like breast and endometrial and ovary for the women, but also meningiomas. So really, when you're thinking about the value of maintaining healthy weight and healthy adipose tissue, it really goes beyond, I think, the first things you think about, like hypertension and cholesterol, to really have many impacts in health. So the other thing that surprised me, or at least I never really thought about it and no one ever talked about it, is the fact that fat tissue is an immune organ. How many people in here knew that? Right? You think of fat tissue as like a blob, like a blob. And it's not. It's actually an immune organ. And if you're someone who has a lot of it, it is a very big part of your immune system now, because by percentages, right? If you carry a lot of body fat, it is producing immune signals, and that can really be a big component of your immune system. So it's not inert. It's not just hanging out. It is immunologically active. And how it talks to the immune system fluctuates based on whether you have a leaner body type or a heavier body type. So it actually changes the immune profile based on how much excess adipose tissue that people carry. And it will secrete pro-inflammatory markers. So if you read about these, these are problems for MS. MS doesn't like these inflammatory markers, and our treatments are designed to try to reduce impact of these types of inflammatory markers. So it really ties in when people say, well, what can I do to help my MS? This directly makes managing MS harder. I think we're great at it, but if we're really looking to have impacts everywhere we can, this is another area that we, I think could consider as part of the treatment plan. And these effects are both local and systemic. Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry. Okay. Got it. Time. I got to hurry. Okay. Local and systemic. Local. When you have fat, extra fat, more than your body can process, the first place it starts to store it is your liver. So people might get a fatty liver. That's a sign that your body's struggling to maintain fat in correct places. That fat is both secreting inflammation into the liver, but also having effects distal organs far away. So it's really having impact many locations. And this is a nice example of what the difference with immune markers are with the different cells. So a lean cell is going to be this column here, and an obese cell is this column here. And you'll see that there's increases in things like B cells and CD8 cells and inflammatory macrophages in obese tissue, and that those volumes are decreased with lean tissue. So how do we actually tackle weight loss in anyone, not just MS, but really anyone? There's sort of 4 pillars that get talked about. So there's the nutrition, there's the physical activity, medications, and surgical treatments. So it helps to get a sense of how do we actually spend our energy. So we have something called the basal metabolic rate. And that is a rate or a number that calculates how many calories our body uses just to exist, to pump your heart, to breathe your breaths, think basic thoughts. That is the energy that you need to survive. And then you can add to that energy digesting food and energy from movement. And we can use that to estimate how many calories in a day your body probably needs. And a good starting point is just to do some journaling to figure out where you are in that formula. Some people eat a salad a day, weight doesn't budge. They're really not eating very much. Their journals show very low numbers. Some people, it might be a small quantity of food, but nutritionally dense and more calories than they realize. Everybody's different. So we start with a journal to get a sense of where the calories are coming from and how much you might consume in a day or in a week. If you don't know how to calculate, I tell people just take a picture, send it to me. I'll help you figure it out. And as far as what, I like to know calories, protein, and advanced level is like fat, sugar, carbohydrates. I will happily just accept calories and protein to start with. And this is a nutrition label to show you. Most people might be familiar with this, but there's always some who aren't as confident reading a nutrition label. So up here, you're going to see calories. Down here, you're going to see protein. And this is per serving size. So you have to look how many servings. A big bag of M&Ms, like the share size, is technically 2 servings. So it's not 240 calories. It's like 520, because I do love those. So that one I have memorized. So there is so much published out there about diets and weight loss. Everybody's got the one that they promote. Everybody's got the one that do this, it'll change your life. These are some of the examples out there. In the weight loss world, the difference in weight loss between these diets is negligible. So we're talking differences of 150, 200 calories a day, maybe. Weight loss is really comparable across the board with many of these diets. So what matters is what works for you. There's not a perfect diet out there that everybody should follow. It really does need to be tailored to you and what you like and what is maintainable. So a general rule of thumb is this is a long-term goal. This isn't, I need to crash diet for 2 weeks and I'm going to reset, my life. This is a daily dedication, and there's days you fall off the wagon, but this is a daily dedication to making these changes. You want to prioritize whole foods. What that means is food that looks like it came out of the earth. If it's been super processed with neon orange cheese dust, that is not a whole food. That's not to say you can't have those, but really you want to add the whole food component. It's not just about what you don't do, it's about what we add to nourish our bodies. So cutting back on sweetened beverages, cutting back on processed sugars. Brains love sugar, right? It can become an addiction. It can become a craving that you think about. This is where the brain really controls a lot of our cravings and urges, and are we satisfied with what we've eaten? And it can be really hard to resist sugar sometimes because we're designed to want it. Cutting back on dining out and foods that come packaged or processed. So if you shop the periphery of a grocery store and stay out of the aisles, you can avoid a lot of the processed foods. Hydrate, of course. Sleep. This matters so much, and we'll talk a little more about that. You want to hit your vegetable goal. Vegetable is fiber. Vegetable is good for your colon. Vegetables are good for you. And protein. You have to consume a healthy portion of protein when you're trying to lose weight, because we don't want to lose muscle. So protein can come from many different sources, not just red meat. Protein is what keeps you feeling full. So when people are eating a breakfast, if they're telling me a more sugary breakfast versus a higher protein breakfast, one is going to make you hungry by 11 o'clock, one isn't. And that protein is going to tide you over much longer in a day than any other carbohydrates or fats, right? So protein is your friend, both from a sense of fullness, but also for helping protect muscle. You want to get about 1 gram of kilogram or 1 gram per kg a day. So for every 50 pounds you weigh, that's about 23 grams of protein. So that could be anywhere from 75 to 150 grams of protein in a day. And many Americans don't come close to that. Or if they do, you want to make sure that they're healthy sources of protein. So these are examples of about 20 grams of protein. So half cup of diced chicken, 3 ounces of tuna, or a 4-ounce ground turkey patty. It's going to get you about 20 grams. So who here has done a diet, did the exact same thing every day for the entirety of the diet, lost weight in the beginning, and then stopped losing weight? I see a few brave hands. Michael. So metabolic adaptation. This is basically your brain is really smart and it learns to work with what you give it. And if you are giving it the same thing, the same nutrition, the same pattern of exercise, the same amount of food each day, your brain says, okay, I'm going to learn to work with this. And the impact of those changes lessens over time. So you go from losing weight to plateauing. That's not a sign that the diet is failing. That's metabolic adaptation. And that's something that we have to take into consideration when we're helping people with their weight loss goals, that they're changing it up enough and having, I think, realistic goals of a speed of weight loss that we can work through this and around this. So sleep matters so much for so much. And most people do not get enough sleep, right? Like we all intend to go to bed, then we're on our phones, and all of a sudden it's 90 minutes later and Candy Crush, we still haven't passed the level, and we finally go to bed because we have to get up in like 5 hours. Not enough sleep will crush your metabolism. So if you want to lose weight, you need to prioritize sleep. More sleep both helps control any nighttime snacking, because if you're sleeping, you're not snacking. It can influence what you choose during the day. So people who are well rested do not crave sugar as much as people who are sleep deprived, right? When you're tired, you want that Frappuccino, not an Americano. Maybe not everybody, but there's good data that shows people that work third shift, people who are sleep deprived have different food preferences. And it's something you might not even think about, but you want to give yourself every advantage when you're trying to do this. So physical activity, this is really important. Working out helps prevent weight gain. It is generally not the linchpin to meaningful weight loss. So if you're not able to work out aggressively, that's fine, because you can bust your butt for an hour, burn 500 calories, eat a bagel with cream cheese, and you've just canceled that out. So it is hard to achieve, for most people, meaningful weight loss through exercise. Exercise is important, but it's important for preventing the weight that you've lost from recurring or coming back. And the general rule of thumb is you want 150 minutes a week. So 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day of the term is moderate to vigorous activity. But people who do this are less likely to regain weight that's been lost. Anti-obesity medicines. These have been a hot topic over the last couple of years. I will tell you, these are not necessarily new. I have used this one about 10 years ago is when I first started using this. So as much as these seem new and current and getting attention, this concept is not new. This is a well understood concept. I had a patient who had a brain attack, and it caused something called hyperphagia, which is basically an inability to stop eating. Gained 70, 80 pounds over a few months. I'd never seen it before, and I've never forgotten it. Could not stop swallowing food, no matter what. The time I did the consult, had eaten almost an entire large package of Oreos during that 20 minutes I was with her. Putting her on this medicine shut that signal off in the brain. She was able to stop overeating. The brain eventually healed itself. She lost the weight. She's been stable ever since. And that was probably the first time that I saw the power of what these medications can do and how much of this really does come from the brain. So these are some of the medicines that are FDA approved. Orlistat is the one that helps block absorption of fat. It gives you greasy diarrhea, generally not popular. It used to come over the counter as Xenical. Phentermine mixed with topiramate. For my migraineurs, you all know topiramate. Contrave, which is bupropion mixed with naltrexone, and then the GLPs. GLPs are the shots, right? So those are daily or weekly shots. These are the ones that are getting most of the attention in the news. So here's something that's really irritating. Semaglutide and tirzepatide. These are very effective weight loss medications. If you have diabetes, they are called Ozempic and Mounjaro. If you use them for weight loss, they are called Wegovy and Zepbound. They are the identical medications, but to try to get one or the other, insurance has put these ridiculous restrictions in place that if you have an A1C here, you go this way. If it's here, you go this way. They are the same medication. They just make it more complicated by giving it another name. So one thing that's really important to talk about is sarcopenia. This here is actually from a website from a home care company in Korea, but I loved this slide, so I just wanted to bring this out. So sarcopenia, this picture up here is an MRI of a muscle, young healthy muscle, and a sarcopenic muscle, meaning the muscle is wasted away. Who's at risk? More mature people, not enough protein or calories, sedentary. If you have inflammatory conditions, and the symptoms are trouble basically moving around, and the treatment, resistance training, high protein, those are really the two big ones. People who lose weight too quickly, people with Ozempic face and Ozempic butt and all of those, catchy terms. They're losing weight, but they're losing fat and muscle at the same time. If you want to lose weight, you have to preserve your muscle. We don't want to get weaker. We don't want to be droopier. We want to be healthy and strong. I think most people would agree that that's a goal. And so this is the mistake I see with everybody using shot medications for weight loss is they're not partnering it with the resistance training and the high protein diet. If you don't change anything else and just take the shot, you're not going to get the best results. If you partner that with a diet that's rich in protein, with resistance training, you're going to get much closer to the idea that you wanted and a healthier way of losing weight while protecting your strength, because we don't want to get weaker. So this is super important. And then lastly, surgical options. I'll touch base really briefly on this. So there's a few different surgical options to assist with weight loss as well. MS patients can have these surgical interventions. Your doctors will work with you to determine if that's an appropriate next step to take. Medications that are coming in the future will be on par with surgical weight loss outcomes. So that's really exciting that we're getting more advances and just more effective treatments. But these are a few that you'll see done. Most importantly, though, people who have the best outcomes are checking in with their doctor frequently about this. So 12 to 26 visits a year give you the best chances of really staying on target and achieving weight loss outcomes. That's a commitment, right? That's not a visit twice a year. Coming in every 2 to 4 weeks to stay on top of this, right? That's a lot to ask of a person. But if you're really wanting to set yourself up to be successful, that's an outcome, right? That helps. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't want to lose weight too fast. Half a pound a week might seem like not a lot, but over a year, that's 25 pounds, and that's wonderful. So slow is fine. Not everybody's going to be at the same speed. And I think most importantly, obesity is a disease, not a character flaw. It is not fork to mouth syndrome, as one of my colleagues once called it, and I wanted to punch him in the face. It's not as simple as, I know what I need to do, I just need to do it. Your brain is really powerful. Your brain decides what it wants, and consciously you may want something different. It can be very hard to resist when your brain is asking for something. That's part of the problem with obesity is the food noise, right? You're thinking about when's that next meal? What's it going to be? What am I going to order when I go out this weekend? And so it's really not as simple as eat less, move more. It is a complicated illness that has a big brain component. And so that's where really working with a neurologist or someone who's obesity trained to really help you understand why your obesity has occurred and how to best treat it really is going to give you the best outcomes, because this is really not something people should be dealing with on their own. This is a medical condition that you should be working with your physicians with. And hopefully the more we can re-educate people as to the fact that this is a disease that needs chronic treatment like any other health condition, hopefully we can improve outcomes and get people the care that they need. Any questions? All right, I don't know how to decide who goes first. Mindy, can you choose? Okay. Woo. Yes. Although that's also very expensive and you can do it without organic, non-GMO, fancy sweeteners. Yeah. So the question was, in cutting out processed sugars, can you get results still if you replace that with natural, fruit sources of sugars? And so in general, I think your body's inflammation is going to be better away from processed foods. There's so much stuff, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but food is very doctored these days. Nutritional content has decreased in food. That's well established, right? I think the more you can step away from processed food, the better the health benefits, probably many that haven't been characterized yet. Now with weight loss, we're also looking to try to create a calorie deficit. So swapping 1 for 1 without a calorie deficit, you may not see a meaningful weight loss, but I bet you will feel different if you have less processed food coming in. So there's kind of 2 parts to that. So part of it is from the lens of weight loss and part is from the lens of just nourishing your body.
Any other questions? Thank you, Doctor. Any other questions? Oh, got a few of them back here.
Okay, so on the Oreo person, you said it changed her brain.
Yeah.
So she was able to come off medication?
Yeah. So she had a scar that formed in the eating center. So eventually that scar stopped being active, settled down, and over time we were able to taper her off.
Okay, so is that the same with Ozempic, Mounjaro, all those?
So they've done studies looking at discontinuation, and a large percentage of people will regain weight after about 2 years of time. And that is not because they are failing. If somebody had high blood pressure and you got them to goal with blood pressure medicines, you wouldn't say, great, we did it, let's stop them, right? You would continue the regimen that worked. If someone had diabetes and you started diabetic treatment, got them to an A1C, you wouldn't say, okay, good job, let's stop everything. And I think that's the difference with obesity is people think, okay, I'm going to get to a goal and then I'm going to stop everything and I'm going to maintain. And there's a lot of predatory companies out there that will sign you up. They'll do 6 months of coaching, 6 months of drug on a coupon, and then say, great, you know what to do. You have the tools, we're done. And then that weight comes right back. And that is, I think, not really fair to patients because it feels like one more time that they have failed. And it's not that they failed, they weren't given the proper tools to succeed. And that's the difference with medications is we now have tools to treat a disease, but most chronic illnesses, it needs chronic treatment. Doesn't mean the dose couldn't come down or be adjusted, but I think you shouldn't look at it as I'm going to do this with a med and then by myself and then feel bad if that doesn't work. Really, these are meds that are designed to be used long-term.
So is that something well, maybe you explained it to someone, but it doesn't seem like, I know people that are on it and I don't think they think that. I think they think they
Yes.
get to come off of it. And then
Yes.
when I think it's probably lifelong. maybe?
And this is where all of those frequent visits matters, because if somebody tapers off and the weight starts regaining, you want to intervene on that sooner than later. People get to decide what they put in their bodies, and I'm not going to tell someone you have to do it my way. But I do want to make sure that there's a good safety net in place where if that plan doesn't work, we can swiftly step in and try to get things back on track.
Okay, and then you used that one medication years ago.
Mhm.
So you probably know the long-term effects. Do they know the long-term effects of Ozempic and Mounjaro? And
So Mounjaro is newer. So the oldest is that liraglutide or Saxenda, which is an old diabetic. And there's not been any evidence of accumulated long-term side effects over time. You know, I'd say the biggest risk now is going to be that sarcopenia because of people using it indiscriminately, maybe not always people who need it, or maybe not always using it in the safest fashion. I think that's probably the biggest thing we're seeing now, and that's preventable.
We got another question back here.
Hi, Dr. Cody. It's Patty Gunas. I'm so happy to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I have been struggling, and I am still being treated at U of M, but my primary care physician now they have a physician who treats obesity across all, diseases. So I've been working with him, and I've been working with the nutritionist, and I cannot get those weight loss drugs. They're not available. They're just not available. So even though, I got it pre-approved and all that, I'm still waiting. It's been 9 months.
Yes.
So, and I also called U of M as far as exploring that weight loss surgery. And the very first question they asked is, are you in a wheelchair? To which obviously I replied, yes. And they basically couldn't hang up fast enough.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just dumping on you, and I'm sorry.
No, that is okay.
I am making an effort. I really am. And I've done, the daily or the twice monthly meetings with the nutritionist and all of that.
Yeah. So the shortages have been completely awful. They started with the Ozempic, then insurance pushed everybody to Saxenda, and they're putting all of these step requirements in place to then get to Mounjaro or Zepbound. It's been a nightmare. So there was at least a good 9 months where I couldn't get anything for my patients. And now currently it's a matter of my patients just having to call pharmacy after pharmacy, and I'll send the script 16 different places until I can get it, in someone's hands. It's been a nightmare. There's not a good solution other than to say the companies are aware, they're changing how they're dispensing the medication in a way that will hopefully help improve access. So like with Zepbound as an example, they're going to create vials instead of one-time use pens that will help improve, access for people. But it's been awful. It really has been a waiting game for a lot of people. And I don't have a good secret insider, tip. They don't really sample those medications, right? They're a long-term commitment. Compounding pharmacies have popped up. So the idea behind a compounding pharmacy is in times of shortages, there's a role for compounding. Compounded medicines have not been studied in the way they're given to you. So when drugs are approved, right, there's a rigorous formula, how it's produced. That's the vetted product. Compounding pharmacies will take an active drug, mix it with something else, and say, here, same thing. Technically not the same thing. When you add other compounds to a medication, you can't always predict how they're going to interact. So in general, the ABOM, and that's the Board of Obesity Medicine, has not recommended compounded supplement or compounded semaglutide or compounded medications at this time. Not to say you won't get offered them or see them out there, but it's hard to encourage someone to use a product that may not be, the product we're hoping for at the right strength, at the right, quality. So compounding is out there. You'll see it. As far as the surgical, MS patients, man, so many times they'll need something and the doc's just like, nope, because of the MS. I'm like, it has nothing to do with that. Sometimes that takes one-on-one conversations to really discuss the case and the risks and the benefits, because the risk in their mind may be a very different risk than the reality. And that, I think, is really on an individual basis. And that's really a one-on-one conversation to say, look, this is their risk. And it might be different than someone in a wheelchair who doesn't have MS, right? There might be more on the line where we have to do this, right? For your independence, to be able to stay home, to stay a one-person assist. These might be really important things. And I think for that, it's really just appealing to that surgeon, figuring out where their concern or barrier is and seeing if you can find a way forward.
Thank you for advocating for all of this. We really, really appreciate it. So thank you for being our voice. Dietary question, since you're in that, do you have any views on dairy? And then my secondary part is for my morning smoothie shake and things like that, for the protein, I was putting in whey protein, which is quasi dairy. Well, it's part of dairy, but I was wondering whether or not that lumps into the dairy and that's kind of inflammatory, and I kind of cut it out and went to a pea protein or something like that. Any thoughts?
Yeah. So it depends on the viewpoint you're coming from. If you're someone who does not get enough protein, I will happily accept whey protein as a way to hit your targets. Pea protein is great too. So I think ultimately the goal is you want to make sure you're getting your needs as well as watching what you're taking. So it's not that you can't have these things. You want to hit your goals. So I'll happily accept a protein supplement, a protein powder, if that's what we need to do right now. I think every person's body is different, and you're not going to find giant studies really studying inflammatory effects of some of these different, protein powders. So there's not really a lot of data to guide some of that, but I think everything in moderation, right? If you use cheese as one of your sources of protein, okay, we'll just make sure you're hitting your vitamins and your vegetables and your fruits, and you're getting all of those other, necessary nutrients. So I think if your diet is 80% cheese and the rest salami, that's probably not, the best. And we should look at, tweaking that one. So I think it's really tailored to the person, and there's many ways to do this, which is kind of a cop-out answer, but also my feeling.
Okay. One question is about, okay, the Mediterranean diet I heard is the best. Is that true, and why? Also gluten.
So Mediterranean, so a lot of that is kind of a spin-off of old cardiac data. So looking at cardiac outcomes, what were the best diets?
Okay.
And so what was healthy for the heart is also healthy for the brain. So that's kind of where the Mediterranean came into play. But it also is a very sensible eating approach, right? Lots of, fruits, veggies, lean proteins, olive oils, instead of a lot of saturated fats. I love the Mediterranean approach. So I think from a nutrient and anti-inflammatory standpoint, yes. Can you eat too much Mediterranean and gain weight? Also, yes. Okay. So part of it is through the lens of MS, and then part of it is through the lens of weight. And they're not always going to be the same. Someone might need emergent weight loss for a reason, and we do it in a way that wouldn't be a healthy way long-term, but is critically important in that moment of time to get someone maybe ready for a surgery or, some other health intervention that they need. So I think any diet can go the wrong way if you're consuming the wrong ratios or portions or volumes. But I think Mediterranean is a great approach if you're trying to say, okay, I want to get away from processed foods. I want to start somewhere. Mediterranean cookbooks are a great starting tool, because sometimes people want like a diet totally planned out for them, and nobody wants to eat the same 6 meals the rest of their life. Like that's just not a thing. So I think from a antioxidant inflammatory, brain health standpoint, great choice. As far as gluten, again, everything in moderation. I have some people who I think are very gluten sensitive, and I have some who seem not as affected. But I think anything that could be inflammatory, you want in moderation. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of white breads with, gluten, probably switching that out for something non-that, could be good. Because really a lot of gluten is going to come from our breads and pastas. And in general, we want to keep those in moderation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? Oh, Jill. Teacher with a question. Teachers don't have questions, they have answers.
Hardly. I've been talking to a lot of people lately about plastics leaching into foods. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there are evidence of microplastics that can be leached from the products we hold our food in, cook our foods in. The long-term health consequences aren't totally clear because this is a newer phenomenon that we're looking at. I have to think it's not a good thing though. But I think it's also really hard right now to avoid every source of plastic. You can certainly look at glass water bottles and glass Tupperware, but this plastic is coming from beyond just the food sources to almost every surface that we interact with. So I think any attempts we can to try to minimize excessive plastic use in our life is probably good, but I also think you can only do so much until the world changes, But yes, so there is some literature coming out looking at this, finding traces of microplastics in bodies, and intuitively, I'm thinking that's not good. I don't have an objection. Yeah.
All right, were you just doing a trick question? Thank you, Dr. Cody.
You're welcome.
This was amazing. Huge namaste for Dr. Cody.
One more thing real quick. Sorry.
Just one more thing.
We had a basket winner for our yoga basket. So to Shamela Khan, if you're here, you win.
Yay.
Okay, that was all.
Thank you, Dr. Cody. All right, you guys, we made it. How about that? Well, it has been my absolute pleasure to be with you today. We all learned so much from such esteemed and passionate speakers and experts in their fields. I hope you take away some information today that will help you in your MS journey. And now I want to bring Mindy back on the stage to say a few words. But once again, thank you all so very much.
What? Yeah. For you, we're so grateful. Thank you. She kept the program moving. She knows just what to say. She doesn't practice. It just comes out. Thank you. This is for you too. We'll talk about it. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about it. You guys have been amazing. I know it's a long, long evening. I've got 2 microphones. So this is the conclusion. This is the conclusion. We thank you all, the MS community, for all your support. Thank you to our amazing speakers. Thank you to our amazing partners. Thank you to our amazing sponsors for your continued support of these programs. You're going to receive a survey. Remember, you're going to receive a survey. Please fill it out if you want your prize. Otherwise, no prize for you. We really need to know what we need to improve. We can only do it if we hear from you. You'll go to the virtual exhibit hall. You're going to get a note that the virtual hall recordings are ready of all the presenters. So if you missed something or you want to listen to it again, go to the virtual exhibit hall when you get our email.